A chilling and heartbreaking case that shook the nation is being discussed. The disturbing disappearance of Dylan Redwine and the intense confrontation on Dr. Phil's show.
I am here to find your son, and I frankly don't give a damn whether you like me or my television show. I care whether or not we find this boy. And if you've got information about where that boy is, you need to tell us.
Dr. Phil's voice was stern as he faced off with Mark Redwine, the father of the missing boy, and he wasn't holding back. He expressed frustration over how Dylan's case was being handled.
Are you kidding me? I devoted 2 hours of national television time to try to find your son, and you won't do one damn thing to help.
For 3 long months, Mark Redwine had refused to cooperate with the search efforts to find his son, Dylan. Dr. Phil wasn't having it. He declared his commitment to finding Dylan, regardless of Mark's feelings about him or his show. Just 24 hours before this confrontation, Dr. Phil had interviewed Dylan's mother, Elaine, and his brother, Corey. They both seemed convinced that Mark was hiding something.
No one can find him. You were the last one to see him, and now he's just gone.
I strongly think that he's involved.
How dare you point the fingers at somebody when you have no proof?
Elaine expressed that no one could find Dylan, and that Mark was the last one to see him. Corey was even more direct, strongly suggesting that Mark was involved.
Very disrespectful, and I believe that everything that's coming out of your mouth is perpetuated by your mother.
I have my own mouth. I can say
Then
my
use
own
it.
words.
Then use it.
I am at you. I don't like you. I hate you, and you have been nothing of a father since.
Mark, clearly agitated, retorted that there was no proof to support their accusations.
I'm not involved in this. No matter how it comes across, whether it be to you or anybody else, I'm not involved in it.
Little did Mark know that this footage would become pivotal evidence for the FBI a decade later.
You have to speculate, where he is and if he's okay and, is he eating? Is he going to be home for Christmas so that we can, celebrate together?
Dr. Phil pressed on, pointing out that no fathers with missing sons had ever refused to take a polygraph, making Mark the only one to do so.
Well, Dylan's mother, Elaine, says nothing her ex-husband, Mark, says adds up, and his explanations seem suspicious.
This refusal raised eyebrows and fueled suspicions, casting a shadow over Mark's claims and actions. On February 26, 2013, Elaine and Mark were on the set of the Dr. Phil show. Dylan had been missing for 3 agonizing months, and the divorced couple hadn't spoken since his disappearance. The atmosphere was tense, with emotions running high as they faced the grim reality of their son's absence.
Do you honestly believe that she and a team abducted him? I was trained as a forensic psychologist, and I'm curious whether you're interested in fighting with her or if you're interested in finding your son. Because since you've been out here, you haven't said one word about your son.
Elaine was adamant that Mark's story didn't add up. She insisted that the details he provided were inconsistent and suspicious. Mark claimed that on November 19th, he left home early and returned around 11 a.m. He said he noticed the TV was on Nickelodeon and that Dylan's backpack and fishing pole were missing.
So you get back at 11:30 and he's gone.
Right.
And so you just lay down and take a nap?
Well, no. When I got back at 11:30, I didn't think much of Dylan not being there. I mean, he knows the area. He's been up to my house many times.
However, Elaine pointed out inconsistencies, explaining that Dylan wasn't into fishing and watched MTV, not Nickelodeon.
That's not...
Did you hurt him?
No, Elaine, I wouldn't hurt him. What kind of mother are you to even think that I was capable of doing something like that?
I was your wife for 18 years.
It seemed like Mark didn't know his own child well enough to fabricate a believable lie. Elaine's frustration was palpable as she challenged Mark's narrative, highlighting how little he seemed to understand about Dylan's interests and habits. This lack of knowledge about their son's preferences made Mark's story even more dubious to those who were trying to piece together what had happened. Despite their son being missing for 3 months, Dylan's parents hadn't communicated. The breakdown in communication added another layer of complexity to the already tragic situation. Mark shifted the blame to Elaine, suggesting she could be involved in their son's disappearance. This accusation only intensified the conflict between them, turning their grief into a battleground of suspicion and blame.
It doesn't matter what I think because I have no way of being able to prove it, and it's only speculative that I even feel that way.
But do you really honestly believe that, or is that just something you're saying? I mean, do you honestly in your heart of hearts believe that this woman is involved in the disappearance of your son?
I believe that it's possible. Yes.
Dr. Phil, trained as a forensic psychologist, questioned whether Mark was more interested in fighting with Elaine than in finding Dylan. His expertise in human behavior and psychology led him to probe deeper into Mark's motivations and actions. Since arriving on the show, Mark hadn't mentioned his son once. Instead, he seemed preoccupied with defending himself and attacking Elaine. This behavior struck Dr. Phil as unusual and concerning. He wondered why a father, supposedly desperate to find his missing child, would focus more on disparaging his ex-wife than on rallying support to locate Dylan.
I was trained as a forensic psychologist, and I'm curious whether you're interested in fighting with her or if you're interested in finding your son. Because since you've been out here, you haven't said one word about your son.
The lack of urgency and genuine concern in Mark's demeanor was troubling to both the audience and the show's host. Dr. Phil continued to press Mark, trying to get to the heart of the matter. He asked pointed questions, aiming to break through the defensive walls Mark had built around himself. The audience watched, captivated by the unfolding drama, hoping that some breakthrough might occur that would shed light on Dylan's fate. Elaine, though emotionally drained, remained steadfast in her pursuit of the truth. She hoped that exposing Mark's inconsistencies on national television would bring them closer to finding their son. The show's producers had prepared meticulously for this episode, aware of its potential impact. They had gathered experts and resources to assist in the search for Dylan, hoping to leverage the show's platform to generate new leads and public interest. As the episode aired, viewers across the country became invested in Dylan's case, many reaching out with tips and information that they hoped might help. The tension between Mark and Elaine was palpable, a stark reminder of how grief and suspicion can tear people apart. Yet, amidst the conflict, there was a shared, unspoken hope that somehow this public confrontation would lead to a breakthrough. As the episode concluded, Dr. Phil made a heartfelt plea to the viewers, asking anyone with information to come forward. He emphasized the importance of community support in such cases. For Elaine and Mark, the journey was far from over. The show had reopened old wounds and brought their pain into the public eye, but it also reignited the search for their son, offering a glimmer of hope amidst the darkness. Behind the scenes, Dylan's brother, Corey, took matters into his own hands. At just 16, he led the search effort, convinced he could still save his little brother. Corey's determination was palpable as he expressed his commitment to finding Dylan and bringing justice to whoever was responsible for his disappearance. Despite his young age, Corey displayed a remarkable sense of responsibility and maturity, organizing search parties, distributing flyers, and tirelessly communicating with law enforcement and media outlets. His efforts were driven by a fierce love for his brother and an unyielding hope that Dylan could still be found alive. Back to the case, Dylan started texting his friend Ryan as soon as he landed, but Mark refused to let him meet his friend that evening. This decision seemed unusual and out of character for Mark, raising questions about his motivations. Dylan, clearly frustrated by his father's refusal, planned to see Ryan the next morning at 6:30 a.m., an unusually early time. This assertiveness from Dylan hinted at underlying tensions between him and his father. The early morning meeting plan suggested that Dylan was determined to make his own decisions and resist his father's control, indicating a strained and possibly volatile relationship. Dylan's eagerness to connect with Ryan as soon as possible upon his arrival illustrated the importance of his friendships and his desire to seek comfort and support outside his immediate family. Friends like Ryan provided a crucial lifeline for Dylan, especially amid the family turmoil and his parents' ongoing conflict.
It was just like a whole 7 months of all this hard work and hope and stuff just shattered. When I was around with Dylan and his father, or when I was around them, they seemed like best friends. I mean, they were really close.
Dylan's insistence on meeting Ryan at such an early hour underscored his urgency to escape the oppressive atmosphere at his father's house, even if only for a brief moment. As the investigation unfolded, every detail about Dylan's interactions and movements was scrutinized. His text to Ryan provided valuable insights into his state of mind and the dynamics of his relationship with his father. Investigators hoped that these clues would help piece together the events leading up to his disappearance, shedding light on any possible foul play or hidden conflicts. The strained relationship between Dylan and Mark became a focal point of the investigation. Witnesses and family members were interviewed to gather more information about their interactions and any potential signs of abuse or control. The search for Dylan intensified, with law enforcement, volunteers, and the community coming together in a desperate bid to find him. Corey's leadership in the search efforts and his unwavering dedication to finding his brother inspired many within the community. His resilience and courage, despite the emotional toll, became a beacon of hope for everyone involved. As days turned into weeks, Corey's determination never wavered, and his efforts kept the search alive, drawing in more support and resources.
It's my little brother. If anybody could make it out, it'd be him. We were not gonna stop until we found the sick bastard that did that to my little brother.
The search for Dylan continued, with every lead being meticulously followed up. The community's solidarity and Corey's relentless pursuit for answers highlighted the profound impact of Dylan's disappearance on those who knew and loved him.
Corey's getting ready to do another interview.
He was the last person to see him, and he's not, helping out with giving us answers that we have questions to. And so until we can put all of the attention back on Dylan, we got to get it off the last person to see Dylan. And he's making it as hard as he can to get the attention off of him.
As the investigation progressed, the truth behind Dylan's disappearance slowly began to surface, revealing a complex web of family dynamics, secrets, and a desperate need for justice. However, Dylan never showed up to meet Ryan, and no one saw him all day. Concerned, Mark texted Elaine, Dylan's mother, who immediately called the police.
Police Fire Dispatch. Hi, my name is Elaine Redwine, and my son Dylan Redwine was visiting his dad up in Durango, and his dad texted me a little while ago and said he could not find Dylan.
My son wasn't even there for 24 hours and he's missing?
First, I didn't take her seriously, and she was like, well, I'm going down to Durango. As soon as she said that, I knew it was a lot more serious.
The search effort was launched swiftly by Roy Vreeland, the local fire chief, in the rugged terrain of Durango.
What's been most frustrating about this search and our investigation is there simply are not any clues. And with an absence of clues, that means we have to check every conceivable possibility. Both parents have been cooperative.
Suspicion fell heavily on Mark from the outset. His behavior raised red flags. He never came out to help with the search, turned off all the lights in his house, and refused to cooperate for 3 whole months. He blocked Elaine and Corey's phones and ignored the pleas of news crews and protesters seeking answers. As hope dwindled and resentment against Mark grew, tensions boiled over on the Dr. Phil show. Corey, Dylan's brother, accused Mark of being involved, citing his lack of involvement in the search efforts and other family events related to Dylan's disappearance. Emotions ran high as the family demanded action from Mark to find Dylan.
I strongly think that he's involved.
Why?
He hasn't done a single thing since Dylan has been gone.
Why do you say that? What has he not done?
He hasn't been to any of the benefits. He wasn't there for Dylan's birthday vigil. He hasn't helped at all with the Find Missing Dylan Redwine Fund.
That's offensive to you.
Very.
And you don't even care. You don't. Where is any of your feelings?
What emotion is it you're trying to get out of me?
I want you to do something to find Dylan.
An unsettling revelation comes to light as Corey shares that Dylan stumbled upon disturbing images on Mark's laptop just months before his disappearance. The photos, too graphic to be shown, deeply unsettled both Corey and Dylan. Mark vehemently denies the authenticity of these images, claiming they were photoshopped.
The images that I have seen have been photoshopped. No, it's not me in the photos. Absolutely not.
As the search for Dylan continues, suspicions mount against Mark. Despite his initial silence and refusal to participate, Mark contacts investigator Tanya Goldbricht when the snow thaws, claiming to have found Dylan's fishing pole in a previously searched area.
And he was moving his four-wheeler out of the garage. He found the fishing pole in the garage, which isn't possible. It had been searched and photographed, and I don't know where it came from, but it was back.
This discovery only fuels the suspicion that Mark has been dishonest and deceptive throughout the investigation. Corey and his stepfather take matters into their own hands, investigating Mark independently to prove his involvement in Dylan's disappearance. Their efforts lead to a significant breakthrough when Mark is spotted near Middle Mountain Road, prompting a focused search effort in the area. Despite the passage of time, Elaine and Corey refuse to lose hope in finding Dylan alive. Their unwavering determination is both heart-wrenching and inspiring, reflecting a mother's undying love and a brother's steadfast resolve.
Oh, I have to hope for Dylan. I mean, I'm his mom. I can't focus. There's no reason to believe he's not. And so I will always hope for Dylan. We need you home, and we will bring you home, no matter what it takes. We are looking for you, and you need to stay strong with us. We need to stay strong together.
Tragically, the search comes to a devastating end when human remains, later identified as Dylan's, are discovered near Middle Mountain Road. The discovery sends shockwaves through the community, confirming the worst fears of Dylan's loved ones.
The search for missing Colorado teen Dylan Redwine has come to an end, and it's not the end anyone was hoping for.
Oh, just sadness. Just, how could you do this to him? I can still hear his laugh. This is so ironic because he truly cared about other people, more so than himself. I know he would have done many great things in his life, and the world is a much better place. Even for the 13 years that he was here, he really touched a lot of people, and he continues to do so, even through his death.
As suspicions against Mark intensify, Tanya conducts further investigations, including polygraph tests. Mark's refusal to cooperate only deepens the suspicion surrounding him, leading Tanya to believe he is the prime suspect.
This is Mark.
Hey Mark, it's Tanya.
Hi, how are you?
I'm wonderful, how are you?
Oh, I'm living the dream, the dream.
Are you intoxicated, Mark?
Nope, not at all.
Okay, then why are you talking to me like that?
Because you can't seem to think no deeper than the surface.
In a rare display of anger, Dr. Phil confronts Mark, demanding answers and cooperation in the search for Dylan. His impassioned plea underscores the urgency and seriousness of the situation, urging Mark to prioritize finding his son above all else. In 2017, La Plata County experienced a significant change when Christian Champagne was elected as the new district attorney. With renewed determination, Tanya and Christian prioritized Dylan's case, pushing for further investigation. The efforts culminated in the convening of a grand jury, which indicted Mark on charges of second-degree murder and child abuse. Mark's arrest in Washington state came as a shock, as he had grown confident that he would never face charges.
Just keep your hands up. Don't move, bud, okay? Is your name Mark? Yes, Mark, do you have any weapons on you, sir? No, sir, I do not.
During the trial, Elaine bravely recounted the last exchanges with Dylan before his disappearance, despite the emotional toll.
What was his relationship like with his mother, to your knowledge?
They were very close. He loved his mom more than anything.
When was the last time you saw Dylan, Ms. Barrett?
The last day he left.
Where was he leaving for?
Here.
Rango area?
Corey emerged as a pivotal witness, revealing the disturbing truth behind the images Dylan discovered on Mark's computer. The defense attempted to discredit Elaine's character and undermine Corey's testimony, but their efforts fell short in the face of overwhelming evidence. Corey's account of Dylan's frustration and defiance against Mark shed light on the events leading to his disappearance. Amidst the trial's intensity, a startling revelation emerged. Mark confessed to fabricating the incriminating pictures, leaving them accessible for Dylan to find. Elaine and Corey firmly believed that Dylan's intention was not to hurt his father, but to assert his truth. Similarly, Champagne's decision to present the images was not for shock value, but to establish a motive for Mark's actions. With motive established, Champagne turned to the physical evidence meticulously gathered by Tanya Goldbricht. In a dramatic courtroom moment, the prosecutor displayed the blood-soaked furniture and floorboards collected from Mark's home. After hours of deliberation, the jury rendered a verdict, guilty on all counts. In a poignant moment, Corey stepped forward, honoring Dylan's bravery and resilience in the face of adversity. To mark the end of their legal battle, Dr. Phil welcomed Elaine and Corey back to his show in 2022. Reflecting on the journey, they found closure in knowing that justice was served for Dylan. Mark Redwine, once defiant, now faces a 48-year prison sentence for the murder of his son. Corey's determination to seek justice for Dylan reflects his unwavering love and loyalty to his brother. Without their relentless pursuit, accountability for Dylan's tragic fate might never have been achieved. Despite the years of struggle, Corey's journey has been one of growth and resilience. Today, as a father himself, he finds solace and inspiration in his own family, cherishing every moment and striving to be the father figure he never had.
And fabricated these pictures?
No. I fabricated the pictures and left them available.
Was there any reason back then for him to plant photos like that for you or for Dylan?
In the aftermath of the sentencing, Elaine and Corey's resilience shone brightly in their interview with the press. Amidst questions about the case and Mark's conviction, one query stood out. How would they like people to remember Dylan? Their answer was a poignant tribute to Dylan's spirit and legacy. They spoke of his infectious joy, his vibrant presence, and his undeniable impact on everyone he encountered. Despite the focus on his tragic end, they vowed to keep Dylan's true essence alive in their hearts and memories, honoring his life by living their best for him. In essence, Dylan's memory lives on not just in the sorrow of his passing, but in the joy and inspiration he brought to those who knew him. It's a reminder to cherish every moment, to live authentically, and to honor the ones we've lost by embracing life to the fullest. Thanks for watching. Please like the video, press the subscribe button, and also drop your thoughts in the comment section. It is a chilling true crime documentary that reveals the dark side of what seemed to be the perfect family. This is the case of Muhammad Shamji, a brilliant surgeon, a loving father, and a ruthless criminal.
The man who murdered a highly respected doctor in Toronto more than 2 years ago got his sentence today. Muhammad Shamji is going to be in prison for at least 14 years. Shamji is also a doctor and the husband of Elena Frick. Shamji pleaded guilty last month to second-degree murder for killing Frick while their 3 children slept. A life sentence is automatic. Only the parole eligibility had to be determined today.
Good afternoon. Muhammad Shamji has pleaded guilty in the murder of his wife, Dr. Elena Frick Shamji.
The plea came just 45 minutes ago. A caution, some of the details may be disturbing.
Charged with first-degree murder, he pleads guilty to second-degree murder today. And for the first time, we hear the horrible details of what happened that night in their North York home, November the 30th, 2016. It really began the 28th when with Muhammad Shamji, Dr. Muhammad Shamji, was served with divorce papers by his wife. A few days later, on the 30th, there was an argument that broke out in the bedroom. It became very violent. He struck her several times. He broke her neck, he broke her ribs, and then he strangled her.
When we think of domestic violence, we often imagine it happening in dysfunctional families. But the shocking truth is that abuse can occur in any household, regardless of social status or profession. Muhammad Shamji and his wife, Elena Frick Shamji, were both esteemed doctors. Muhammad was a renowned neurosurgeon known for his work on spine injuries and diseases, while Elena was a highly respected family doctor with a PhD. For years, they dedicated their lives to saving others, yet few knew the dark secrets hidden in their private lives. This story gripped the world's attention. Muhammad Shamji admitted his guilt not out of remorse, but to spare his 12-year-old daughter, who had tragically witnessed her mother's death, from testifying in court.
Did you want to be in the courtroom?
I had some questions that I needed to be answered, so I decided to stay.
What questions did you have?
Just how it had happened. I was confused, I guess, so I really needed to know. I don't think I would really want to talk to him again in my life, I guess, just because I would be uncomfortable. I wouldn't really know what to say, and I just don't want to see him again.
Do you have any questions for him?
My questions have already been answered, so not really. It's been like a roller coaster of emotions. It's been emotional. I've been really angry and hurt and sad over what's happened, and I guess that's really it. I mean, there are times that I felt really happy, but there are also times that I just felt really awful about everything.
Just before the tragedy, Ilana had posted a photo of Muhammad on social media, joking that her husband, who practiced jiu-jitsu, could not only heal, but also break a neck. This grimly prophetic comment foreshadowed the horror that would soon unfold. Let's start with Ilana Frick's life before meeting Muhammad. Born in September 1977 in Windsor, Ontario, Ilana was the younger of two daughters in the Frick family. Her parents, George and Anafie, had immigrated from Croatia to North America in the early 1970s. Ilana was a miracle child. Her mother had been told she could never conceive again after serious complications during her first pregnancy. Growing up, Ilana was incredibly close to her older sister, Caroline. The Frick family worked hard to provide their daughters with a good education. Both sisters excelled in school, but Ilana stood out for her determination and passion for learning. She spent her free time reading, dancing, practicing gymnastics, and competing in track and field. During her middle school years, Ilana even worked summer jobs in cornfields to help support her family and manage her budget wisely. Ilana excelled academically, standing out for her determination and passion for learning. By high school, Ilana had set her sights on a medical career, driven by a desire to help others. She graduated as the top student and enrolled in a prestigious medical university. Around this time, she began a romantic relationship with Matthew Ryan, a fellow student she had known since high school. Their romance lasted until graduation, but Ilana decided to continue her studies in Ottawa's university residency program, while Matthew settled for a job at a local hospital. Their long-distance relationship continued until 2002, when they decided to remain friends. Ilana was interning at one of the country's top clinics and aimed to earn a doctorate, while Matthew hadn't advanced in his career. Then, in February 2003, Ilana met Muhammad Shamji during a night shift at the hospital. Muhammad, a year older than Ilana, was doing his residency in the neurosurgery department. He came from a family of prominent doctors. His father, Fard Shamji, was a renowned surgeon, and his mother, Edith, a talented psychiatrist. Muhammad's older brother, Ali, was an experienced medical biophysicist. Both brothers graduated from Yale University, and Muhammad later earned his doctorate from Western Ontario's Research University. Muhammad's impressive background and tall, dark-skinned appearance immediately caught Ilana's attention. Although Muhammad didn't initially approach her, Ilana was smitten and tried to attract his attention. Soon, Muhammad asked his colleagues for her number, sent her a message, and their relationship began to blossom. Their connection grew quickly, and they spent a lot of time together, sharing their dreams and aspirations. Muhammad's dedication to his career and his charm made a significant impact on Ilana, who admired his work ethic and the legacy of his family's medical achievements. They started going out regularly, and their bond deepened with each passing day. They enjoyed discussing their goals, planning their futures, and supporting each other through the challenges of their demanding careers. Muhammad's impressive background and charismatic personality only made Ilana more drawn to him, and she felt they were building something truly special. In the summer of 2004, Ilana discovered she was pregnant. This news brought more anxiety than joy, as she was unsure about the future and how this would impact her career and personal life. Muhammad, following his strict conservative Muslim upbringing, felt compelled to marry her. They decided to tie the knot with a wedding that included 2 ceremonies to honor both their cultural backgrounds and their friends' expectations. The first ceremony adhered to cultural customs and traditions, paying homage to Muhammad's heritage. It was a grand event, filled with vibrant rituals, traditional attire, and a deep sense of cultural pride. Family members from both sides attended, celebrating the union with joy and festivity. The atmosphere was rich with the sights and sounds of their cultural heritage, creating a memorable experience for everyone involved. The second ceremony was a more contemporary celebration, held for their friends and colleagues from the hospital. This event was less formal, focusing on the couple's modern life and professional achievements. Friends and colleagues gathered to witness their union, enjoying a relaxed and joyous atmosphere. The event featured speeches, toasts, and a celebration of the couple's journey together, blending their professional lives with their personal commitment to each other. Both ceremonies symbolized the merging of their different worlds and the beginning of their new life together. They settled into married life with a mix of excitement and nervousness about what the future would hold. Ilana continued to pursue her medical career, now balancing the demands of her profession with her new responsibilities as a wife and soon-to-be mother. Muhammad's career in neurosurgery was also advancing, and the couple supported each other through the challenges and triumphs they faced. As they navigated their new roles, the couple's relationship continued to evolve. Ilana's pregnancy brought about significant changes in their dynamic, but they both remained committed to building a life together. They faced the typical struggles of balancing demanding careers with their personal lives, but their shared experiences and mutual support helped them grow closer. The journey they embarked on together was just beginning, and despite the uncertainties, they looked forward to the life they were creating as a family. They moved into a spacious house in Ottawa, and in January 2005, welcomed their daughter, Yasmin Ina. However, Muhammad was disappointed. He had hoped for a son. His focus on his career left little time for family, and he grew increasingly irritable and abusive towards Ilana. He criticized her appearance, refused her cooking, and called her names. Ilana endured this quietly, even as the verbal abuse escalated to physical violence. In the summer of 2005, Muhammad punched Ilana in the face, breaking her nose. She fled to friends with her baby and filed a police report. Shockingly, Muhammad begged her to return, promising to change. Driven by fear for his career, he needed to avoid a criminal record as he prepared to enroll at Duke University. Ilana, emotionally dependent on him, dropped the charges and followed him to North Carolina. This decision baffled friends and family, but Ilana believed in his promises. In the United States, they experienced a brief period of calm. Muhammad was accepted into an elite biomedical engineering program at Duke, while Ilana enrolled in a master's program at the School of Policy and Health. Their relationship seemed to stabilize, and in August 2007, they had a second daughter, Fisa. Yet, Muhammad's disappointment at not having a son persisted. Despite this, the family appeared to reconnect and spent more time together. They engaged in family activities, visited local attractions, and tried to create a semblance of a normal family life. In late summer 2009, the family returned to Canada and settled back in Ottawa. Ilana decided not to stay on maternity leave for long, diving back into her career. She resumed her work with a renewed sense of purpose, hoping to regain some normalcy and stability for her children. However, the semblance of normalcy was deceptive. The underlying tensions in their relationship remained, and the emotional scars from past incidents lingered. Despite their efforts to present a united front, cracks began to show in their facade. Muhammad's temper and controlling behavior resurfaced, causing strain in their marriage. Ilana confided in close friends about her struggles, but she felt trapped in the cycle of abuse and reconciliation. Her friends and family grew increasingly concerned for her well-being, urging her to leave Muhammad for good, but Ilana felt torn between her love for her children and her fear of disrupting their lives. Muhammad's career continued to advance, and he gained recognition in his field. This success only served to deepen Ilana's isolation, as Muhammad used his professional status to manipulate and control her further. He insisted on maintaining a perfect public image, while privately their relationship deteriorated. Ilana's attempts to seek help were met with resistance from Muhammad, who threatened her with dire consequences if she exposed the truth. As the years went by, the pattern of abuse persisted. Ilana's resilience was tested repeatedly, and she struggled to find a way out of the toxic environment. The brief periods of calm were overshadowed by the recurring episodes of violence and manipulation. Ilana's hope for a better future for her children kept her going, but the toll on her physical and emotional health was immense. The family's return to Ottawa did not bring the fresh start Ilana had hoped for. Instead, it marked the continuation of a troubled and tumultuous relationship. Ilana's decision to re-enter her career provided a temporary distraction, but the underlying issues in her marriage remained unresolved. The facade of normalcy they maintained could not hide the reality of their situation forever. The challenges Ilana faced were far from over, and the path to true freedom and healing remained uncertain. Muhammad's controlling and abusive behavior resurfaced. During a family ski vacation, he hit Ilana, leaving her with a deep cut on her arm. She told others she had hurt herself skiing, but confided in her best friend that Muhammad had inflicted the injuries following an argument over his affair with a colleague. Ilana's friend urged her to divorce him, but Ilana refused, still hoping to save their marriage. In the summer of 2016, their relationship completely fell apart. After celebrating their 12th wedding anniversary in early September, Ilana told Muhammad she wanted a divorce. Muhammad refused, claiming he was content. Desperate for affection, Ilana had an affair with a colleague. She felt loved and desired again, something she had long missed. On November 25, 2016, a heated argument broke out when Ilana told Muhammad divorce was inevitable. The next day, she met with a divorce lawyer and then left for a medical conference. Muhammad sent her pleading messages to reconsider for the sake of their children. On November 30th, Ilana returned home and made her final phone call to her parents, sounding anxious but assuring them everything was fine. Tragically, on December 1st, Ilana's mother couldn't reach her. Muhammad claimed Ilana had left him and the children for her lover, but her parents didn't believe him. They contacted a close friend who confirmed Ilana's car was still in the driveway. Fearing the worst, her parents flew to Toronto and reported her disappearance to the police. As the investigation began, the police quickly discovered inconsistencies in Muhammad's account of Ilana's whereabouts. The story that she had left for her lover seemed implausible, especially considering her car and belongings were still at the house. The police intensified their search, interviewing friends, family, and colleagues to piece together the events leading up to her disappearance. Ilana's colleagues and friends painted a picture of a woman trapped in a cycle of abuse, trying to escape but fearing for her and her children's safety. The affair she had was a desperate attempt to find solace and love in a life filled with control and fear. The more the police learned about Muhammad, the more they suspected foul play. As the days passed, the community rallied around Ilana's family, offering support and assistance in the search. The media picked up the story, bringing national attention to her disappearance.
The murder of family physician Ilana Frick fits a pattern of violence in this country. Of every violent crime reported to police in 2017, 30%, nearly one-third, was committed by an intimate partner. According to the Canadian Women's Foundation, a woman is killed by her partner every 6 days. The Shamji beat and strangled Frick to death in 2016. That he's receiving what's described as a life sentence, neither is in dispute. The question is how long before he's eligible to apply for parole. Both the Crown and defense agree that should be no less than 14 years. Joanna Remiliotis tells us what was said in court today was met with tears and rage.
The children can barely talk about their mother. It's still too hard. Today was a glimpse into a family's shattered lives. In court, Anna Frick spoke first as her daughter's killer stared ahead. The nightmare that began that day has never ended and will never end until the day I die. He has destroyed all our lives forever. The children still cannot bear to have their mother mentioned because it is so painful to them. As Mother's Day approaches, she went on, sobbing. Instead of making cards and trinkets for their mother, they lay flowers on her grave. Ilana Frick's body was found in a suitcase. It had been dumped in a river north of Toronto, her hair cut off, her face so swollen. When police asked her parents to identify her, they barely could. The horror of having to identify my daughter after her brutal murder, when she was virtually unrecognizable, will haunt me forever. Court also heard from Frick's friends and colleagues who described her as a rising star, a devoted doctor and mother. Few knew behind the happy facade the abuse was escalating, that she intended to divorce Shamji. He admits he killed her days after he found out. While no one condones his crime, defense also read out 14 letters of support from Shamji's family, colleagues, and former patients. It was hard for the Fricks to listen to, even harder when Shamji addressed the court, turning to apologize to them. "I've thought back to that night," he said. "I should have killed myself and not Alana." Frick's sister muttered, "Yes, you should have." He went on, "To our children, Yasmin, Faiza, and Marius, I have devastated your lives. I have hurt you immeasurably. I can only say I'm sorry."
Just a ploy, just a show, you know.
After court, Frick's sister, Caroline Lakich, was still seething.
The wrong life was taken. You should have taken your own. You took a valuable life. If you didn't like yours, why kill somebody else? You're the menace to society.
As for his apology,
it's bullshit. I don't believe it. He's only sad because he got caught. He's not sad for my sister. He's not sad at all.
Shamji's sentence will be handed down tomorrow. Among them, no one expects it will bring justice. Joanna Rumiliotis, CBC News, Toronto.
Under mounting pressure, Mohammed's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He tried to maintain his innocence, but the weight of evidence against him was building. On December 5th, the police obtained a search warrant for the Shamji home. During the search, they found bloodstains and other signs of a violent struggle. This discovery, combined with witness testimonies and digital evidence from Mohammed's devices, led to his arrest. He was charged with the murder of Ilana Shamji.
As we mentioned, Mohammed Shamji was sentenced to life in prison with no eligibility for parole for 14 years. For more on the sentence, I'm joined by Karen MacArthur. She's a criminal defense lawyer in Toronto. So, Karen, what do you make of the sentence?
Well, it's not that he received a sentence of 14 years. He's received a life sentence for his guilty plea to second-degree murder. He is eligible for parole at 14 years.
The CBC's Megan Fitzpatrick was in the courtroom in Toronto and joins us live. So what did the judge have to say in passing this sentence, Megan?
Well, Andrew, he outlined the reasons going into his decision, both the mitigating and the aggravating factors that go into sentencing. And as for the mitigating factors, he talked about Shamji's character, talking about how he was known as a skilled neurosurgeon who saved many people's lives. But then the judge also said that's quite a juxtaposition with the fact that he took his own wife's life. But he did say he had no prior criminal record. He also pointed to the fact that Shamji did plead guilty to second-degree murder last month, sparing the family a trial, which he said would have been extremely painful and part of the ongoing nightmare that the family's already been going through for the last 2.5 years, particularly for the 14-year-old daughter who was scheduled to testify against her own father because of what she heard that night, as you heard her grandmother describe there in that clip. And the justice said that that would have been the worst possible scenario he could have imagined for the daughter, having to testify against her own father in the murder case of her mother. So he was given essentially some credit for the guilty plea, but the judge also noted that guilty plea only came last month, Andrew, 2.5 years after he was charged with the murder. But Shamji did also issue an apology and show some remorse in court yesterday during the victim impact statement part of ahead of that victim impact statements that were also read in court. He apologized directly to his 3 children and expressed regret for what he had done. The judge also talked about Alana Frick and her character as an aggravating factor, talking about how she was so loved, how she was so smart and brilliant, was a dedicated doctor and considered a rising star in her field. He also talked about the fact that this was a case of domestic violence, how Alana Frick was abused by her husband physically and emotionally, and that the sentence must reflect that kind of crime. And Andrew, one of the detectives that worked on this case also spoke about that to reporters outside the courthouse. Take a listen to what he said.
It's one of the most heinous and serious crimes that often get committed behind closed doors and people don't know about it. And that's where I think it's very important as adults, as citizens, that if we recognize abuse, if you recognize somebody who's going through it, you need to speak to the authorities, and you need to bring it to somebody's attention that can take action.
The trial that followed revealed the extent of Mohammed's manipulation and violence. Witnesses testified about the abuse Ilana endured, and forensic evidence painted a grim picture of her final moments. Mohammed's attempts to cover up the crime were meticulously dismantled by the prosecution, exposing his lies and deceit. In the end, Mohammed Shamji was found guilty of second-degree murder. The verdict brought some measure of justice to Ilana's family and friends, but the pain of her loss remained. Her story became a powerful reminder of the dangers of domestic violence and the importance of support systems for those trapped in abusive relationships. Ilana's legacy lived on through the memories of those who loved her and the efforts of advocacy groups working to prevent domestic violence. Her tragic end served as a catalyst for change, encouraging others to speak out and seek help before it's too late. The community's support and the relentless pursuit of justice by the police ensured that Ilana Shamji would not be forgotten, and her story continued to inspire efforts to protect and empower those at risk. Thanks for watching. Please like the video, press the subscribe button, and also drop your thoughts in the comments section. A chilling and mysterious case that rocked a community to its core. It's September 5th, 2017. The summer break is over, and students at Wild Lake High School in Columbia, Maryland are buzzing with excitement for the new academic year. They're especially eager to see their favorite social science teacher, 31-year-old Laura Wallen. But there's a problem. Laura doesn't show up.
To the family, friends, and students of Laura Wallen, we are so sad to report tonight that the Wild Lake High School Teacher of the Year was killed.
This all comes just days after that news conference in Montgomery County. They hosted it on Monday, and when we had the suspect there with the family. And now looking back at it again, it's truly remarkable to look at this now.
This is completely out of character for her. She's the kind of teacher who wouldn't miss a day of school without a rock-solid reason. So, what happened? Let's rewind a bit. Laura Wallen, 4 months pregnant, had been preparing for the new school year with enthusiasm. Her colleagues and students loved her, and she was looking forward to getting back into the classroom. But on this Tuesday, Laura was nowhere to be found. The school management tried to contact her, but their calls went unanswered. Growing increasingly concerned, they reached out to her family. This is where things started to get really strange. Laura's family revealed that they were also trying to find her. Her sister Jennifer had received a bizarre text message from Laura the day before. This message was totally out of the blue and uncharacteristic of Laura, raising alarm bells immediately. With no one able to reach her and this strange message in hand, her family reported her missing to the Montgomery County Police Department. As the hours turned into days, the search for Laura intensified. The community rallied together, hoping for her safe return. But there were no signs of her, no clues, no sightings, nothing. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. The police were working around the clock, following every lead they could, but they were hitting dead ends. However, the investigation soon began to uncover some unsettling clues. The strange text message Laura had sent to her sister suggested that she might have been in some sort of trouble. Was she trying to tell them something? Did she know her disappearance was imminent? As the police dug deeper, they started to piece together a darker, more complex picture of what might have happened to Laura. Rumors began to circulate. Had Laura stumbled upon something dangerous? Was someone after her because of something she knew? The mystery deepened, and with each passing hour, the urgency to find Laura grew. The community was on edge, and her family was desperate for answers.
The missing teacher's father and sister did the same. They say she was 4 months pregnant. Pictures of her sonogram were posted on a refrigerator.
Totally torn our world apart. It's like a TV drama that you wish you could shut off, but you can't.
The Wild Lake teacher's sister may have been one of the last people to make contact with her before she disappeared.
I spoke with her on Saturday, just through text message, and then briefly on Sunday, and then I had one text message in the morning on Monday.
Then, a breakthrough. Investigators discovered some key pieces of evidence that began to shed light on the case. It turned out that Laura's disappearance was connected to a series of dark secrets. As the police continued their relentless search, They were about to uncover truths that would shock everyone. So, what exactly happened to Laura Wallen? What did those cryptic messages mean? And what were the secrets that led to her sudden disappearance? Stay with us as we delve deeper into this haunting mystery, uncovering the twists and turns that ultimately led to the truth about Laura's fate. Laura's parents were immediately alarmed when she sent her sister Jennifer a strange and unsettling text message. Worried about her safety, they contacted the police, who quickly performed a welfare check at Laura's home in Olney, Maryland. However, Laura was nowhere to be found, and her vehicle, a 2011 black Ford Escape, was also missing from the driveway. Inside the house, everything appeared normal. There were no signs of a struggle, no broken glass, and no indication of forced entry. With growing concern, Laura's parents suggested that the police speak with Tyler Tessier, a 33-year-old man who had been dating Laura for the past decade and was the father of her unborn child. Tyler informed the officers that he hadn't seen Laura since the previous Sunday, which deepened the mystery. It was as if she had vanished without a trace.
Put the suspect in front of a camera because he's going to talk, and he may inadvertently say something or present something in a way that you know is not true.
Thank you all for coming here. Laura, if you're listening, doesn't matter what's happened, doesn't matter what type of trouble, there's nothing we can't fix together, myself and your family. There's so many people that miss you. There's so many people that were out. We haven't slept, we haven't eaten, we're just looking, and we're praying that you're safe. And I'm asking to just let us know that you're safe. If somebody has her, please understand that you've taken away a huge person in so many people's lives. Friends and family, students that she has. I know what she means to me. I know what she means to everybody else. And we just want to know if she's okay. We just want her back. Super excited for start of the school year. I know she had talked to her principal and her teachers, like her coworkers, about her being pregnant and how excited she was, and it's just a complete shock that I think leading up to the weekend that she's missing, I don't believe anybody has any inclination to think that something was wrong, or
Any of your last conversations with her?
I'm sorry?
Any of your last conversations with her?
I don't know where she is. That's all. I don't know. I know we're all trying to do everything we can to find her, and I just pray that she's safe and she comes back. That's all I care about right now. Laura and I have known each other probably for 10 years now. We've, any normal relationship, just take one step at a time, and you take the progress that comes with you. And been to doctor's meetings, we've been sonograms and all the prenatal care that you could ask. And sorry.
To understand Laura's disappearance, let's go back a bit. Laura Elizabeth Wallen was born on February 10th, 1986, to Mark and Gwen Wallen. Raised in Olney, Maryland, alongside her older sister Jennifer, Laura was known for her close bond with her family. Her passion for helping others eventually led her to become a social science teacher, a role in which she thrived and made a significant impact on her students. The search for Laura, initiated on September 5, 2017, was led by Montgomery County Police Chief Tom Manger. He and his officers were joined by Laura's family, friends, and both current and former students in the desperate search for the missing woman. One of her ex-students, Saquon Maxwell, organized a community group of over 20 people to distribute flyers and inform the local area about Laura's disappearance.
Have you heard about the missing school teacher?
A community effort to help find a beloved teacher.
Let them know we feeling this just as much as them, bro.
Saquon Maxwell says he had Laura Wallen as a teacher, but says she's much more than that to so many people.
She's always willing to put her students first, so I know if one of us was in this situation, she would have been head-on, attacking it and in the streets just like we are.
He says he organized a meeting at Wild Lake High School where Wallen teaches on Saturday. A group of about 20 met up, got a stack of flyers, and hit the streets in Columbia.
My heart goes out to her wherever she is.
I feel like I'm doing something. I feel like I'm helping to find her. I feel like the more people that know what's going on, the faster we can find her.
A small group then went to Olney, where their former teacher lives. They went door to door, talking to neighbors and giving hugs into the evening.
She had a spark and she cared beyond the classroom.
Spreading a message that Maxwell says hits too close to home.
The school needs her. We miss her. We need the loving and the smile and the care.
The group tells me they're not going to stop passing out these flyers and working to spread the word until she's found. In Olney, Amy O'Bear, ABC 7 News.
Police officers canvassed Laura's neighborhood, asking questions and monitoring areas between Howard and Montgomery counties. Her father, Mark, made a heartfelt public plea through the media, asking anyone with information to come forward. "I want to let Laura know that we're out there looking for her, and we're not giving up on her. One of the hardest things a father can do is have your child taken away way too soon," he said, his voice heavy with emotion.
We miss her and we love her, and it's one of the hardest things a father can do is have your child taken away way too soon, and all we want is for her to come back to us.
As the days passed, the community's anxiety grew. Laura's colleagues and students held candlelight vigils, hoping for her safe return. Local news outlets kept the story in the headlines, urging anyone with information to step forward. Meanwhile, the police continued their investigation, following every lead and scrutinizing every piece of evidence. The mystery of Laura's disappearance gripped the entire town, leaving everyone desperate for answers. The relentless search for Laura was about to yield a crucial lead. On Thursday evening, September 7th, 2017, an employee at a gated complex in Columbia, Maryland, made a significant discovery. In one of the complex's dumpsters, he found Laura's license and cell phone. When the police arrived, they also discovered her vehicle backed into a parking spot. This discovery marked a pivotal moment in the investigation. So, what was behind Laura's sudden disappearance? The clues were beginning to piece together a darker narrative. Tyler Tessier, who had initially cooperated with the police, started to come under closer scrutiny.
Laura, if you're listening, doesn't matter what's happened, doesn't matter what type of trouble, there's nothing we can't fix together, myself and your family. There's so many people that miss you. There's so many people that were out. We haven't slept. We haven't eaten. We're just looking. And we're praying that you're safe. And I'm asking to just let us know that you're safe. I don't know where she is. That's all. I don't know. I know we're all trying to do everything we can to find her, and I just pray that she's safe. She comes back. That's all I care about right now.
The strange text message Laura had sent her sister suggested that she might have been in danger. Was Tyler hiding something? Did Laura know more than she let on? As police dug deeper, Tyler's behavior became increasingly suspicious. He made public pleas for Laura's return, often standing beside her parents, but his stories were inconsistent. It seemed like he was trying to lead the investigation away from him. The community watched in shock as the case unfolded, each revelation more chilling than the last. Finally, the truth came to light. The police uncovered evidence that implicated Tyler in Laura's disappearance. It was revealed that he had been leading a double life, and his relationship with Laura had taken a dark turn. The once hopeful search for Laura turned into a heartbreaking discovery when her body was found. Tyler was arrested and charged with her murder, bringing a tragic end to the mystery that had gripped the community.
5:30 p.m. this afternoon, Tyler Tessier, Mrs. Wallen's boyfriend, was arrested for her murder. Since Ms. Wallen was reported missing by her family 9 days ago, we've determined that Mr. Tessier was the last person known to have been with the victim.
In a baffling turn of events, the investigation into Laura Wallen's disappearance revealed a significant clue. Her vehicle was found parked in a gated complex just across the highway from Wild Lake High School, where she worked. This oddity struck investigators and led them to question why Laura would leave her car there. The police took the evidence in for further testing and began diving deeper into Laura's background, questioning those closest to her. As the investigation progressed, more disturbing details emerged about Tyler's life and his interactions with Laura. The police discovered that Tyler had been involved with other women and had been deceitful about his relationship with Laura. These revelations painted a picture of a man desperate to maintain control over a situation spiraling out of his grasp. The community, still reeling from the initial shock, struggled to come to terms with the brutal reality of Laura's fate. Laura's friends and family were devastated by the news, but they found some solace in knowing the truth. Memorial services were held to honor her memory, and the community came together to support her loved ones.
Andre, the students at Wild Lake High School, where Laura Wallen taught, named her Teacher of the Year, the second year in a row that she received this honor. But this time her parents accepted the posthumous award for her. Mark and Gwen Wallen called it a proud moment, but one of mixed emotions, saying they miss her every day beyond description.
The case of Laura Wallen serves as a stark reminder of the importance of vigilance and the impact of domestic violence, highlighting the need for greater awareness and resources to help those in similar situations. The investigation team split into two groups. One group focused on retracing Laura's digital footprint, while the other questioned her family members and boyfriend.
Laura Wallen was reported missing on Monday. Family and friends have not heard from her since then.
ABC 2's Mallory Sefaste is following the story tonight. Mallory, do police suspect foul play in this case?
They wouldn't say whether they suspect foul play today, just that they are concerned. Family members told police that this is very out of character for Laura Wallen. She's a well-liked teacher at Wild Lake High, and she's several months pregnant. Again, police are concerned for Wallen's emotional and physical welfare, and they're asking for the public's help. The principal at Wild Lake High School sent a letter out to the community yesterday morning. Students were made aware of Wallen's disappearance. The school crisis team will be available to speak with students and staff.
Laura's computer and cell phone were searched for information that could build a clear picture of her whereabouts. Her car was stripped down to look for evidence, and financial transactions and cell phone records were meticulously searched to find any trace of her. As the police questioned Laura's parents and sister, a clearer picture of the events leading up to her disappearance began to form. Laura's father, Mark, revealed that the family had decided to go away for the Labor Day weekend, but Laura had planned to spend time with her boyfriend, Tyler. This was confirmed by her sister, Jennifer, who told police that Laura believed Tyler was planning to propose to her. Jennifer provided the police with a series of text messages she and Laura shared over the weekend. In these messages, Laura told Jennifer that Tyler was taking her on an adventure in the countryside on Saturday, September 2nd, 2017. Mark added that Tyler had expressed his intention of marrying Laura after discovering she was pregnant. However, Jennifer pointed out that something had changed by Monday morning, September 4th, 2017. Laura sent Jennifer an unusual text message claiming she was convinced the baby wasn't Tyler's, but her ex-boyfriend Antoine's. This was suspicious, as Laura hadn't seen Antoine in over 2 years, and she had even spelled his name incorrectly. When Jennifer tried to call Laura, there was no answer, and no more responses came through. When the family returned on Monday evening, September 4th, they found Laura was not at home. Instead, they discovered candles burning in her room and her belongings untouched. This absence was unusual and alarming. Her family's concern grew when Laura failed to show up for work the next day, prompting them to report her missing to the police. The investigation intensified as detectives examined the messages and the timeline of events. The unusual text about Antoine and the lack of response from Laura raised red flags. The discovery of her car and belongings further fueled suspicions, pointing towards foul play. Tyler's behavior and inconsistencies in his statements added to the growing suspicion surrounding him. As police continued their search, they uncovered evidence that painted a disturbing picture of Tyler's actions and intentions. His public displays of concern contrasted sharply with the emerging details of his private life, revealing a man capable of deception and violence. His alibis did not hold up under scrutiny, and his behavior during interviews was erratic and contradictory. These inconsistencies, combined with the discovery of Laura's belongings and vehicle in the gated complex, pointed overwhelmingly to Tyler's involvement in her disappearance. Ultimately, the evidence against Tyler became insurmountable. The investigation's findings led to his arrest and the formal charging of Tyler Tessier with Laura Wallen's murder.
Around noon, detectives and members of the Montgomery County Police Search and Rescue Team were searching a wooded area near Price's Distillery Road in Damascus. They located a patch of freshly dug ground in a secluded area of a field. Cadaver dogs indicated on the area, and ultimately, detectives found the body of Laura Wallen in a shallow grave. Her body has now been recovered. At 5:30 p.m. this afternoon, Tyler Tessier, Mrs. Wallen's boyfriend, was arrested for her murder.
This tragic case highlighted the importance of thorough investigative work and the need to look beyond surface appearances to uncover the truth. Laura's disappearance and the subsequent revelations about Tyler's actions served as a sobering reminder of the potential dangers lurking in seemingly ordinary relationships. Laura Wallen's tragic story is a somber reminder of the dangers that can lurk behind closed doors and the importance of thorough, relentless investigation. Her memory lives on in the hearts of her loved ones and the community that rallied to find her, reminding us all of the enduring strength of hope and the pursuit of justice. Thanks for watching. Please like the video, press the subscribe button, and also drop your thoughts in the comments section.
Despite having 4 lovers, she committed the most horrific act, murdering her own husband. From the outside, everything looked like a fairy tale that many people would envy. But Antonio's murder soon opened a Pandora's box full of lies, manipulation, and lust. Let's travel all the way to Spain, where we uncover the story of a young woman named Maria, also known as the Black Widow. It may be hard to believe, but Maria had 5 lovers at once, none of whom she cared for. This story is beyond a love triangle of morals. It is, in fact, a truly uncommon and unbelievable tale. Continue listening to find out what happens. Let's first learn who our main character is. Maria Jesus Moreno Canto was born on September 16, 1990, in Plasencia, Spain. She grew up in a happy household surrounded by her parents and 4 siblings, where her father owned a plumbing business to support the whole family. Maria was raised in a very religious family. Due to this, she was named Maria Jesus, a name she didn't like and preferred to be called Mehe. At a young age, Maria showed artistic talent. She practiced drawing and won several competitions throughout her childhood. As she grew up, Maria started to become very flirtatious, and after graduating high school, she left her hometown to study nursing in Barcelona. This metropolitan city gave her the freedom to discover herself and new experiences. There, she made new friends, enjoyed the nightlife, and was ultimately convinced never to return to her hometown again. During a professional internship, Maria met her future husband, Antonio Navarro, a mature and very successful engineer. Antonio wasn't a stranger to Maria, as he knew one of her brothers, with whom he had gone to college. In 2011, Maria and Antonio started dating, and she became Antonio's first serious girlfriend. He was 9 years older than her, but despite their age difference, the relationship looked almost perfect. They decided to move in together, and 5 years later, they got engaged after a magical proposal from Antonio. Soon after, Maria found a job at a hospital, and on September 3, 2016, the two officially tied the knot and were ready to progress further in life together. Their marriage appeared idyllic on the outside, but this was just a facade to hide the growing darkness. It was later learned that the couple had doubts about marrying each other since Maria had cheated on Antonio in the past, and she continuously complained about his lack of attentiveness and control, which led her to feel suffocated and oppressed. Maria and Antonio were two completely different people. He was an introvert who enjoyed staying at home, unlike Maria, who preferred to party and meet new people. Despite these differences, they still decided to get married. On August 16, 2017, everything changed. Antonio was leaving for work around 7 a.m. As he was getting into his car, he was suddenly attacked and stabbed 6 times, collapsing immediately on the ground. 8 hours after the incident, Antonio's body was discovered by a neighbor around 3:30 p.m. that same day. When the police arrived at the crime scene, they initially suspected that Antonio's death was the result of a failed theft attempt. But this belief was quickly dismissed because Antonio had all of his belongings with him, including his wallet. After contacting his family to share the tragic news, the police began their investigation by questioning his wife, Maria, his parents, and finally his brother. The police asked them if they knew anyone who might have wanted to hurt Antonio, as the circumstances suggested it wasn't a random attack, but that he had been specifically targeted. His relatives, friends, and colleagues pointed out that he was kind, happy, and very interactive, and did not appear to have any enemies who would do such a thing. Antonio was buried 3 days after his murder, where Maria read a love letter she had written for him at the ceremony. The investigation continued calmly to discover who killed Antonio. 5 months passed, and on January 10, 2018, the police arrested 2 people, shocking the public. If we take a look at Maria's alibi during her husband's murder, everything seemed fine. She texted Antonio the night before the murder that there had been a schedule change, and she needed to work. But further investigation revealed that she was not on duty. Another thing that made the police suspicious of Maria was that she seemed concerned about her husband's death. But as soon as the police gave her a little break, she immediately jumped on her phone and started sending messages. The police then discovered that she had 2 phones and requested permission to wiretap her. As a result of the wiretapping, a mountain of secrets unraveled, including her affair. During the time she was married, Maria was in a relationship with Jose, a 43-year-old publicist she had met 3 months before the murder. The police then had a suspect, Jose, and a motive, jealousy. But there was no link between him and Antonio, and therefore no proof of his involvement. When Jose was brought in for questioning, it turned out he had no idea Maria was married and had only discovered this information after the murder. However, he forgave her, and the relationship continued as Jose planned to marry Maria and start a family. While examining her phone, the police came across an even more interesting conversation. Maria was talking to a 47-year-old man named Salvador, a work colleague. Salvador was married for 22 years and had 2 children who were 18 years old at the time. Colleagues described Salvador as a laid-back and polite person. The wiretap investigation proved that Maria was also having an affair with Salvador, and their entire relationship history was exposed. Maria and Salvador met in September 2015, when he started working at the hospital. The two got along quite well despite their age gap. Their relationship began when Maria was newly engaged and ended briefly when she got married. They stopped seeing each other, but after a while, they resumed their relationship, usually meeting at his place or the hospital. What's even more overwhelming is that Salvador's wife also worked at the same hospital, so Maria and Salvador were very successful in deceiving everyone. Salvador served as Maria's puppet, a person she called for any small request or other needs, such as repairing her household appliances. He simply couldn't refuse to fulfill the needs of this lovely young woman. As the case moved forward, disturbing facts about Maria and Antonio's relationship continued to surface. and the facade they had built as a happy couple was completely destroyed. Antonio's brother was a key person that helped the police advance further in their investigation. Since Maria and Salvador weren't aware the police were wiretapping their phones, they used this fact to set up a trap. Antonio's brother met with Maria and told her that the police were making good progress and even had a suspect. Maria quickly called Salvador to caution him. After learning this information, the police had been anticipating this behavior, making it evident that the two were responsible for Antonio's murder. As a result, both were arrested on January 10, 2018. Maria refused to accept responsibility for her husband's murder, claiming she had nothing to do with it and that Salvador took full responsibility to protect her. She claimed Salvador was simply an older co-worker infatuated with her and killed Antonio to eliminate his rival. Continuing to have fantasies about her, they were both imprisoned in the same prison but in different units. While waiting for the trial, Salvador's defense attempted to persuade him to incriminate Maria to reduce his crime responsibility and thus his sentence. He adored Maria and refused to tell the truth, especially after receiving love letters from her. Maria wrote passionately about how she missed him, loved him, and couldn't wait for the trial to end, using romantic and encouraging words that made Salvador believe his relationship with Maria might have a future after they both served their sentences. She did this by gaining favors from inmates who sent the letters to Salvador. Salvador's hope drastically faded when he discovered that Maria was having intimate relationships with at least 2 other prisoners. After receiving this information, Salvador finally decided to speak the truth. He revealed everything about the case, beginning with the planning process and continuing with all other details. According to him, the plan to murder Antonio came about after a serious incident at his workplace, where several of his colleagues died and Antonio nearly died himself. When Maria met Salvador, she expressed her desire for Antonio to die in the accident, and they began planning his murder from that point forward. They decided on August 3, 2017, that the murder would take place on August 12, 2017. This is supported by numerous calls and messages exchanged between the two at the time. While planning and analyzing their options, they decided the murder should be done quietly with a knife. Salvador purchased the knife himself, and after killing Antonio, he threw the weapon into a septic tank. The police later discovered the knife and confirmed it was indeed the weapon used to murder Antonio. When Salvador came forward with the truth, it revealed many secrets. However, Maria complicated things so much that it appeared impossible to entangle them. A disturbing revelation was that one day before her husband's murder, Maria told Antonio she was leaving for work. The truth was that she went to another lover of hers, Thomas, a physiotherapist with whom she had previously spent several nights. During this time, Maria managed to have 3 lovers outside of her marriage. Maria met Thomas 6 months before getting married, and that's when they started a relationship. Thomas tried to talk her out of marrying Antonio, who later discovered her affair by finding messages on her phone. Antonio decided to forgive her if she promised never to see Thomas again. Maria made the promise, but continued to see him behind Antonio's back. Thomas stated that Maria told him several times that her husband was abusing her, and he felt sorry for her. What surprised me the most was Maria's decision to have dinner with her husband one day before his murder. Little did he know that she had planned his murder with one of her lovers. The next day, Maria texted Antonio to let him know that her schedule had changed and she wouldn't be able to come home that night because she was on duty. She also informed him that dinner was prepared for the evening. Antonio woke up and prepared to go to work. Salvador, who had come to carry out his sinister mission, arrived on a motorcycle wearing black glasses and a cab that Maria had given him. Salvador wore latex gloves to enter the garage to avoid leaving any fingerprints. He hid in the garage as he patiently waited for the arrival of his enemy. When he saw Antonio, he attacked him from behind in a violent and sudden manner, stabbing him 6 times before fleeing the scene unnoticed. His next move was surprising. Salvador did nothing else but change his WhatsApp profile, signaling Maria that he had completed the job. He then disposed of the knife and his blood-stained clothes in the trash. Later, Maria and Salvador met at Maria's sister's home, who was on vacation. Salvador recounted every sickening detail of the crime. To avoid suspicion, they agreed not to contact each other for a few weeks. Salvador thought he could finally be with Maria, but she had different plans. She met Salvador again at her husband's funeral, greeting him from afar. Maria began partying immediately after the funeral, but her family advised her to keep quiet because she was still in mourning, and her behavior would be misinterpreted. She continued to go out and see Jose, the publicist, as well as Thomas, the physiotherapist. Aside from these two men, Maria began dating Sergio, a security guard she met at a nightclub. He knew nothing about her situation and, when questioned, stated that she did not appear to be in mourning or sadness. Maria continued living multiple lives until she was arrested. Her love life was a real maze that complicated the police's work even more. Further investigation revealed that Maria had another love, a nurse who worked at the same hospital. She saw him while married, and the two occasionally went on intimate dates. According to Salvador's statements, Maria was content and unconcerned about the consequences, focusing instead on getting the money as soon as possible. Antonio had taken out a life insurance policy through his work, so Maria expected a widow's pension of 1,100 euros per month and a premium of 47,000 euros since he died violently. She told many of her friends about it, contacted the insurance provider, and asked the administrative services to declare Antonio's death as a violent accident to receive the maximum payout. All of this served as evidence that she was motivated by money. Maria never admitted she was the mastermind behind her husband's murder. She defended herself by accepting the affairs but denying she ordered the killing. She explained that she was too scared to call the police when she learned about the murder, but not scared enough to stop seeing Salvador. This allowed her to justify meeting him immediately after the murder. Everything was crystal clear for the authorities. Maria ordered Salvador to kill Antonio for the widow's pension and part of his inheritance. While Salvador accepted because he was in love, on October 14, 2020, Maria was sentenced to 22 years in prison and Salvador to 18 years in a highly publicized trial. The court determined that Maria had aggravating circumstances because she was married to the victim, while Salvador had extenuating circumstances. In addition to jail time, Maria was sentenced to pay 200,000 euros to Antonio's parents and 50,000 euros to his brother to cover the family's legal expenses. A month later, on November 18, 2020, a popular jury confirmed Maria's sentence of 22 years and Salvador's of 18 years in prison. Maria's family was devastated because they initially believed she was innocent, if not a victim, and that Salvador had orchestrated everything. On the other hand, Salvador's family was shattered. His wife fled for divorce, and his children refused to visit him. His ex-wife stated that she never imagined Salvador capable of planning and committing such a heinous crime and was unaware of his affair. Maria does not appear to have learned her lesson. Even in prison, Maria behaves in the same way, but Salvador is no longer her puppet. She doesn't communicate with him since she sees him as being in the past. She regularly works as a nurse's assistant or in the prison kitchens and maintains relationships with inmates. Maria was discovered having intimate relations with David, a convicted murderer, during a class in a small room in a socio-cultural building. Aside from David, she is said to be in a relationship with another inmate who also works in the kitchen. Maria maintains multiple relationships and, thanks to her charming personality, she obtains products such as cigarettes and alcohol from prisoners. As a result of her tasks, Maria has gained a privileged status in prison, allowing her to enjoy recreational activities, visit the sports hall and library, and even watch television from her cell. Salvador, on the other hand, is no celebrity. He has been emotionally broken down, hasn't talked to anyone in a long time, and frequently cries. His cellmate revealed that he has promised to keep an eye on Salvador to prevent him from committing suicide. A protocol is in place to keep inmates from committing suicide, usually lasting 2 weeks in theory. But for Salvador, it lasted months due to his unstable emotional state. I choose to present this case not only because of the evil murder, but also because of Maria's character, a woman with 5 lovers, which is still something very unusual. Further research revealed that Maria was diagnosed with a high psychopathic score. People with a psychopathic personality often have a sexuality marked by several characteristics, such as sexual precocity, multiple sexual partners, an uncommitted attitude towards sexual relationships, and hypersexualization, all of which can be found in Maria's behavior. Her behavior is described as a pattern of recurrent, intense, and excessive preoccupation with sexual fantasies, strong sexual urges, and behaviors out of her control. She appeared to have lost track of her actions, continuing to lie and cheat on each of her many lovers. A 2012 study found that individuals with a high psychopathy score tend to seek more risky sexual behaviors. Maria had numerous affairs with men she met on the road, nights out, at work, and in other places. It is thought that she may feel very few emotions, particularly negative ones like fear and stress, which may explain why she engages in such risky behavior. These kinds of sexual experiences could compensate for her emotional poverty, satisfying one of her primary needs, intimacy to the extreme. Due to a lack of empathy, despite not being completely capable or choosing not to feel emotions, she knew how to channel them. She wrote passionate love letters to Salvador while having other relationships and likely not feeling the same way about him. Maria, not wanting to be with her husband but unable to afford divorce, chose to kill him, not wanting to be with Salvador anymore but unable to afford jail time. She continued to manipulate him. Salvador was in a dependent relationship with Maria and became so consumed by her that he killed another human being. It is mind-blowing to learn that Maria tried to convince all her lovers to murder Antonio, with Salvador being the only one who accepted. It is unimaginable how Salvador must have felt learning Maria had cheated on him, and that he wrecked his family for a woman who no longer wanted to be with him. This is the story of the Black Widow, a woman capable of having not a double life, but multiple lives, deceiving almost every person she interacted with. While she continues with her behaviors, it looks like her story ends not with a conclusion, but with a suspenseful "to be continued." On July 28, 2018, police arrested sisters Christina, Angelina, and Maria Khachaturian. They never imagined the huge public outrage that would follow, dividing opinions in Russia. Some compare it to the impact of the O.J. Simpson case in the United States. The story of the Khachaturian sisters and their father, Mikhail, begins in Yerevan, where Mikhail was born in 1962. Coming from a conservative Armenian family with strong ties to the Orthodox Church and Caucasian customs, they were forced to leave their country due to a historical event. In February 1988, the Supreme Soviet of Nagorno-Karabakh requested to join the Armenian Soviet Socialist Republic, but Azerbaijan rejected the decision, leading to protests in both countries. Ethnic tensions and demonstrations led to violent clashes in Sumgait and Baku, where the Armenian population was attacked. Mikhail fled Baku with his family to avoid violence. They arrived in Moscow with plans to immigrate to America, but due to paperwork and family matters, they stayed in the Russian capital. In 1996 in Moscow, Mikhail met Aurelia Dunduk, who later became his wife and the mother of his children. Aurelia and Mikhail's marriage was not exactly a fairy tale. As Aurelia tells it, on the very day of the wedding, just before the ceremony, Mikhail hit her. Despite the tears, they went ahead and got married. This situation continued for 20 years. Mikhail did not restrain himself even in front of relatives or strangers. Feeling no shame for his violence, the Khachaturians lived in a 2-room apartment with Mikhail's mother, sister, and nephew. 10 people shared the same space. Despite appearing to be pious and following strict religious rules, Mikhail was superstitious, imposing severe rules for the family, especially for his wife, whom he forbade to work and restricted from going out. The family shared Mikhail's patriarchal views, arguing that Aurelia should endure beatings as a good wife. In this environment, the family grew up. Aurelia, at the age of 19, became pregnant with their first child, Sergei, in 1999. Christina was born. A year later, Angelina, and in 2001, Maria. The first to suffer Mikhail's abuse was Sergei, bullied and beaten under educational pretexts. When he graduated at 16, Mikhail threw him out of the house. The same story was repeated with Aurelia in 2015. Not only did he expel her, but he also forbade her to see her daughters, threatening her with death if she tried. Terrified, Aurelia fled, knowing of her husband's violence and convinced that he would make good on his threats. For 2 decades, she endured beatings and abuse from Mikhail. When she had the courage to ask the police for help, she was ignored. In a moment of desperation, she went so far as to cut herself with a hunting knife he owned. Even so, no one did anything to help her. Following the absence of the eldest son and Aurelia, Mikhail's violence was turned against his daughters, on whom he imposed a series of unbearable tasks. He regularly beat them and subjected them to cruel treatment, including forcing them to be intimate. He demanded that they always be available to his requests and come at the first call. He had a special bell that he rang, and as soon as they heard it, they had to run immediately to attend to him, regardless of whether it was day or night, and do what he ordered, bringing water, food, and various other things. As a consequence of these events, Christina, one of the sisters, tried to take her own life, but was resuscitated by doctors. It is not known if it was for fear or being told of her actions, or for the pure pleasure of treating them as his priority, but Mikhail was isolating them, which was detrimental to the girls' education. Maria and Angelina attended the same grade, but in the last few years, they were almost never allowed to go to school because their father forced them to take care of him. As the sisters later recounted, their father constantly threatened them with different weapons. He also installed a camera so he could watch them when he was not present at home. Among the horrible insanities to which the subject subjected his 3 daughters, one example was forcing them to eat the hair of the family dog. This was happening in the 21st century, and everyone was watching: neighbors, teachers, and even the daughters' friends. And other parents witnessed how Mikhail treated them badly. Although the school psychologist tried to talk to them and their husband about their family situation, the neighbors and teachers preferred not to interfere and did not give them any significant support, which unfortunately was not uncommon in Russia. In 2017, due to pressure from the Russian Orthodox Church and those upholding traditional values, the parliament passed the slapping law. The law removed the criminalization of domestic violence, considering it only an administrative offense. In addition, Russian President Vladimir Putin issued a decree that reduced sanctions against domestic violence, punishing it only with fines. In this context, it was not surprising that when the psychologist tried to talk to the girl's father, Mikhail threatened them, telling him not to interfere in family affairs. In 2018, the Khachatorian sisters were practically prisoners at home, suffering physical and mental abuse from their father. Their mother and brother knew nothing, but it was easy to tell from what the 2 of them experienced before they were kicked out. The worst part was that their grandmother and paternal family accepted everything as normal, thinking that Mikhail was protecting them to lead an honorable life. On the evening of July 7, 2018, Mikhail returned home from treatment at the Soloviev Psychiatric and Neurological Center. Entering his apartment, he was angry about alleged expenses and disorder. Blaming his daughters, he called them one by one, locked them in a room, and sprayed pepper spray in their faces. The substance gave Christina such a severe asthma attack that she fainted. After punishing his daughters, Mikhail went to sleep on a couch. It was at that moment that Angelina and Maria decided that this day would be the last day they would endure the abuse. At night, while their father slept on the couch, Angelina, 18, sneaked up and hit him over the head with a hammer, followed by Maria, 17, who wounded him with a strong hunting tool, which the man often threatened them with. But Mikhail was as strong as a bull, so he woke up and tried to defend himself and leave the apartment. Christina, the oldest of the 3 at 19 years old, upon hearing the commotion and seeing what was happening, took the same can of pepper spray that her father had used and sprayed it in his face to prevent him from catching one of her sisters. In the middle of the Khachatorian family quarrel, Angelina took Maria's knife and gave the final blow to the father who had mistreated them until that moment. The reaction of one of the sisters after the crime was recorded in a video. Afterwards, the 3 girls cut their arms with a knife to simulate defenses, as if their father had attacked them. After that, they called the police and an ambulance. When they arrived at the building of Altofivsko, Moscow, the autopsy revealed Mikhail's body with multiple knife wounds, as well as cuts to the chest and neck. According to the police report, in their search of the house, the police took several weapons that belonged to Mikhail. There was everything: a knife, a hammer, a crossbow, a rifle, 2 air pistols, a traumatic weapon, 16 bullets and 16 darts. The traumatic weapons fired rubber and pepper shells. They caused a lot of pain, but do not lead to death. The next day, Christina, Angelina, and Maria, his 3 daughters, were arrested and accused of being responsible for their father's death. During interrogation, they admitted to the crime. According to what they told, Mikhail beat them, humiliated them, and also subjected them to moral and sexual abuse over the years. The motive, according to the investigators' report, was a very strained personal relationship, as the father caused them moral suffering for a long time. On July 29, the trio was charged with murder without aggravating circumstances. Sisters Christina, Angelina, and Maria Khachaturian called their father an evil sex addict. They also said he had subjected them to all kinds of cruel and inhuman treatment systematically, in addition to using them as slaves for years. During the investigation, the sisters claimed that their father committed horrible acts with all three of them and forced them for years to engage in forbidden carnal relations against their will. Friends and family members also testified about more than 10 incidents of sexual violence against them. A medical examination confirmed that all three had injuries resulting from sexual abuse. The youngest of the sisters, Maria, was declared insane at the time and sent for mandatory medical treatment. The judge extended the jail sentence for another 72 hours. A court spokesman reported that during the trial, investigators upgraded the charges from simple murder to murder under Article 105.2 of the Russian Criminal Code, making the expected punishment more severe. On July 31st, representatives of the Moscow Public Surveillance Commission visited the sisters in a pre-trial detention center. The girls complained that after the arrest, their legal rights were violated by the police. According to what they told the commission, their rights were never explained to them, and testimony was taken without the presence and advice of their lawyers. In early August, the investigation examined the murder weapons and questioned relatives and friends of the defendants. Investigators received copies of videos from surveillance cameras at the Khachaturian home and conducted a reconstruction of the events as part of the crime scene investigation. Prosecutors concluded that the sisters acted in concert and that the younger sister, Maria, stabbed her father at least 35 times. Their legal representatives argued that the sisters lived in an environment of constant threat to their own lives, as they were practically isolated from the outside world by their father's orders. They were convinced that it was impossible to get outside help, which made the situation desperate. Hence, their actions were aimed at stopping the inevitable violence committed against them. According to the girls' defense team, the act was the result of necessary self-defense. On August 2nd, the Ostankino Court of Moscow extended the remand of another 2 months. 4 days later, the Central Office of the Investigative Commission took over the case. Russian Human Rights Commissioner Tatiana Moskalkova said the court decision was too harsh, and the defense appealed the sentence. In a paradox of life in pretrial detention, the defendants were given the chance to study and talk to a psychologist for counseling, something they were forbidden to do at home by their father. In mid-August, the investigation recognized Mel's immoral actions towards his daughters and confirmed psychological and sexual abuse. In early September, following a mental health examination, it was recognized that the younger sister was unaware of her actions, and she was transferred to the psychiatric ward of Butyrka prison. According to the evaluation, the other two sisters were mentally healthy, but were diagnosed with battered woman syndrome. Although the court initially rejected the request for house arrest, at the end of September, sisters Maria and Angelina, the youngest and the middle one, respectively, were released from the detention center. However, for 3 months, they were banned from using the internet as well as from communicating with some family members and the media. The Russian media gave various versions of what happened, but all agreed that the girls had long suffered beatings and forbidden carnal acts from their father. Thus, while the judicial process progressed, public opinion was learning, thanks to the work of journalists, about all the hell experienced by the three sisters since their childhood. The media began to publish audio recordings and correspondence from the girls proving that they suffered violence of all kinds at the hands of Mikhail. The lawyers opted for a strategy that denied any planned conspiracy and focused on the spontaneity of the actions that led to the fatal attack, arguing that the sisters acted this way because of their difficult emotional state. In text messages obtained from Mikhail's phone and posted on social media by one of the attorneys, it was evident that the father threatened to take their lives and force intimacy not only on them, but also on their mother. In an April 2018 text message, he specifically threatened to beat and kill them. In the message, he accused them of having sex with a friend, insulted them by calling them prostitutes, and promised that they would die as prostitutes. Transcripts of the interrogations also painted a chilling picture of mental, physical, and sexual abuse dating back to at least 4 years before the fatal attack. During the investigation, a video of the sisters' repeated abuse was released. In it, Mikhail was clearly screaming and hitting his daughters because he considered the apartment a mess. It was Mikhail himself who recorded everything. The defense lawyers argued that the organizations did not take the necessary measures after receiving complaints about Mikhail from the teachers at the sister school. It was known that Mikhail was repeatedly reported to the police, but after his death, law enforcement officials turned a blind eye and denied receiving such reports, both through the hotline and the local police station. The girl's mother, Aurelia, suspected that the police inaction was due to Mikhail's close ties to local police chiefs. Later, whistleblowers from the Russian investigation newspaper Novaya Gazeta confirmed this information. They stressed that in Russia, domestic violence is rarely discussed in public, and human rights advocates mention that police often ignores complaints. Activists pointed out that women face harsh prison sentences if they commit violent crimes while defending themselves against an aggressor. In the case of the three sisters, lawyers and activists argued that they were forced to act to save their lives and blamed poor legal protections for abuse victims in the country, where penalties for domestic violence have been softened in recent years. They noted that this left victims with only one option: the girls defended themselves. However, not everyone believed in their innocence. In the more conservative Russian society, there was a strong backlash. Surprisingly, the teenage girls did not have the backing of their own family. Several of Mikhail's relatives defended him and branded the girls as liars. They argued that the alleged attacks of domestic violence were simply the father's responses to their provocations. They went so far as to say that they took his life for money, accusing them of having mercenary motives, despite the fact that the defendants renounced their father's inheritance. In addition, the grandmother, Kanel Christina, registered in the apartment. The girl's cousin stated that they lied about the beatings to defend their father. One of the aunts, Naira, assured that no evidence of sexual violence against the adolescents was found. According to her statement, medical tests would have shown that 2 of the 3 were virgins. In relation to what supposedly happened, the aunt pointed out that she had a secret boyfriend. Because of this way of looking at the facts, the sister's uncle, together with his wife Naira, requested and was granted recognition as a victim in the investigation. The Khachatorian sisters' court case provoked a strong public reaction and was repeatedly analyzed and discussed on state television channels. In January, the prosecutor's office confirmed the allegations made by the defense that the girls had suffered beatings, constant humiliation, threats, and abuse, including physical and sexual violence. Prosecutors later asked the investigative committee to change the classification of the case from premeditated murder to necessary self-defense. Parana, one of the lawyers, told the state news agency TASS at the time that this basically meant the end of the criminal investigation against the sisters, who faced up to 20 years in prison for premeditated murder. However, to everyone's surprise, Victor Grin, the same prosecutor who recommended reducing the severity of the case, made an unexpected decision in May, confirming that they would impose premeditated murder charges against the sisters without explaining the drastic change. Marita Tejan, who joined the defense and had experience in domestic abuse cases, linked the change of prosecutor Victor to a growing trend of disregard for human rights, especially after the controversial amendments to the Russian constitution following the July 1st referendum. On June 14, 2019, they increased the charges to premeditated murder committed by a group of persons or as a result of a conspiracy. With sentences of 8 to 20 years in prison, the prosecution indicated unlawful acts of violence committed by the father as the motive for the murder. In response, the lawyers filed complaints with the chairman of the investigative committee. Alexander Bastrikin insisted that the investigation should recognize self-defense as the main motive. For their part, the investigators asked to extend the sisters' ban on using the internet, communicating with relatives, and talking to the media for another month. On June 26, the request was accepted, and the ban was extended until July 28th, then further extended. The case, quite prominent in the media, provoked a massive public outcry, with activists defending the sisters. There were major demonstrations in Moscow, St. Petersburg, and other cities in their support. Activists organized many demonstrations calling on the authorities to change the classification of the case. The young women also received support from singers, artists, journalists, and non-governmental organizations. Figures such as former presidential candidate Ksenia Sobchak and the System of a Down singer Serge Tankian called for clemency for the sisters. However, activists of the Men's State, a conservative Russian organization, opposed the sisters' march, considering them cold-blooded criminals. 4 people were arrested for rioting, 3 of them members of the Men's State. The public outcry was due to the fact that the case highlighted the shortcomings of the Russian judicial system. In the media and social networks, people actively debated the ethics of the judicial process. Supporters of the Khachatorian sisters launched a petition to the investigative committee to stop the criminal proceedings. As of June 2019, more than 115,000 people had signed the petition. At the same time, many criticized the apparent happiness shown by the sisters in photos on social networks. At first, public pressure appeared to have had an impact on some events in the case. In an early defense development on June 11th, it was reported that the investigative committee planned to charge Mikhail posthumously with torture, violent acts of sexual nature, and forced participation in sexual acts. However, in late 2019, despite discovering that the 3 sisters were abused and mistreated by their own father, the Commission of Inquiry announced charges of premeditated murder. Prosecutors argued that Mikhail's murder was clearly premeditated, first because he was asleep, and second because the sisters coordinated the attack by allegedly stealing the knife they had been using since the morning. Instead, the sisters' lawyers insisted that the Russian criminal code allows self-defense not only in situations of immediate aggression, but also in cases of ongoing crime. A 2019 poll by the Levada Center found that 47% of Russian women and 33% of men considered the Khachatorian sisters' actions justified. Another poll by Mediazona, a Russian media outlet that covers justice in prisons, showed that nearly 80% of Russian women imprisoned for premeditated murder between 2016 and 2018 were trying to protect themselves from an abuser. In early 2020, the deputy prosecutor general reportedly refused to sign an indictment against the sisters, suggesting that investigators should reclassify the charges from murder to necessary self-defense. Although investigators objected, Prosecutor General Yuri Chaika insisted on the order and stressed the need for additional psychological and psychiatric evaluations. By May 13th of that year, an additional investigation was completed, and the murder charges still stood. In July, the Prosecutor General's office approved the indictment. After a long and convoluted pre-trial investigation, the trial began in Moscow on July 31st. The 2 older sisters, Christina and Angelina, were tried in the same trial. Maria, who was a minor at the time of the crime, was charged after her 18th birthday. At the beginning of the trial, the prosecutor requested that the defendants be prohibited for at least 6 months from accessing the internet, making statements to the press, having contact with trial participants, and participating in public events such as demonstrations in support of the defendants. In August 2020, when the case reached the Moscow City Court, a motion by Christina and Angelina's lawyers to have the case heard by a jury was granted. Maria was declared unfit to stand trial, and prosecutors were expected to request medical treatment for her in a separate trial. In the midst of the complicated legal process, with 3 defendants, 2 separate trials, and conflicting opinions of the representatives of the law, an event occurred that further complicated matters. Surprisingly, on December 4th, 2020, the Basmany court in Moscow declared the investigators' refusal to initiate a criminal case against Mikhail Khachatorian illegal. Accordingly, such proceedings were to be initiated. Another development stemming from the Basman court decision occurred in early February 2021, when the Moscow City Court returned the case against Angelina and Christina to the prosecutors until their father's action obtained a legal qualification. In March, the posthumous case against Mikhail was opened in the Busky District Court of Moscow on charges of sexual assault, sexual coercion, and causing torment. In the same process, the 3 sisters were recognized as victims. Experts during the investigation stated that the accused manipulated people through intimidation, violence, cruelty, insults, and humiliation. In addition, he resorted to assault, abuse, physical and sexual violence, and showed signs of disorder of perversion. To make matters worse, he disseminated audiovisual material with explicit intimate images of his own daughters. A report by the Serbsky Institute for Psychological, Psychiatric, and Medical Examinations concluded that the father was a child sex offender with sexual preferences directed at his daughters. However, a lawyer representing the deceased, Olga Kova, requested the dismissal of the statutory rape charges due to the lack of confirming biological traces. On that occasion, he also said that the teenagers had access to their father's cell phone and they could have sent the alleged sexually explicit film. According to his criteria, the duty of the investigation was to prove that it was Mikhail who sent this video, but this was not done. On May 29, 2022, it was reported that the investigation against Mikhail was over. He was charged with sexual violence, assault, and distribution of sexually explicit material. All of Mikhail's actions that were exposed at the trial were chilling, considering that the target of his cruelty was his own daughters. Perhaps the most shocking was that he forced them to dig their own graves. At the trial of the deceased abuser, it was determined that the continued abuse caused significant damage to the physical and mental health of his daughters. This finding opened the possibility of exonerating the three sisters. After a lengthy legal process, they were finally recognized as victims, which gave them hope of regaining their freedom since the crime would be reclassified as self-defense. However, a final verdict was not yet issued in Mikhail's trial. As of early October 2023, Christina and Angelina were still under house arrest as their trial is on hold pending the conclusion of their father's trial. Women's rights advocates argue that the sisters need psychological rehabilitation rather than a prison sentence. Recently, a new psychiatric evaluation of the trio emerged, which could result in the dropping of charges against all of the sisters. The evaluation revealed that the sisters were suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder at the time of the events. In the meantime, the Khachatorian sisters await sentencing. The defense lawyers seek to have the case reviewed by the judiciary and to set a precedent in jurisprudence on the legitimate defense of victims of abuse in Russia. So far, what we have to say is the case of the Khachatorian sisters has generated a strong reaction in public opinion. For several months, all TV channels in Russia discussed the manner of death of the abusive father. The role of the Moscow police was also heavily criticized for failing to take action against Mikhail following allegations of physical violence made by his ex-wife. It was revealed that police officers usually treat domestic violence as a family problem and provide little or no help to the victims. The Khachatorian case quickly became a cause célèbre for human rights groups who are fighting to pass a law to protect victims of domestic abuse. Today, we shall acquaint ourselves with a perplexing case that demands unwavering nerves and will be evaluated with great ambiguity. I leave the conclusions to you, but let us delve directly into the matter at hand. Lacey Fletcher was born on November 25, 1985, to her parents Clay and Sheila Fletcher. She was the only child in a family residing in a small village in Louisiana. The village had no more than 1,000 inhabitants, and its name translates to slaughter, which is quite fitting for the theme of today's story. When Lacey was around 9 years old, she moved with her parents to a new home in a well-to-do residential area on Slater Street. This street culminated in a cul-de-sac with grand houses and beautiful gardens. From an outsider's perspective, it seemed that life there was much more beautiful and happier than elsewhere. The Fletcher family appeared to be a typical middle-class family. Lacey's mother, Sheila, worked as a secretary in the court, overseeing all administrative procedures. Lacey's father, Clay, worked for a non-profit organization. The family was devout, attending church every Sunday. Lacey attended a Baptist academy and played on the volleyball team. Neighbors said that Lacey was no different from other children. She was cheerful, active, and enjoyed socializing with other kids. She appeared as a petite, well-coordinated girl who loved engaging in sports in the garden or running along the street. However, when she was 14 years old, her parents withdrew her from school and she continued her education at home. By that time, signs of Asperger's syndrome had begun to manifest in Lacey, albeit subtly, and to the untrained eye. Asperger's syndrome is a form of autism characterized by pronounced impairments in social communication and interaction. The intellectual development of those affected is nearly the same as that of a healthy individual. It is not entirely clear why Lacey was withdrawn from school and placed under homeschooling. Her parents never made any specific statements publicly regarding this matter. Perhaps it was somehow related to Asperger's syndrome and social disorders, but neither the neighbors nor the children noticed anything unusual in Lacey's behavior. A friend and classmate of Lucy later said that they became friends immediately when Lacey was attending school and described her as a very close and dear person. She mentioned that Lacey was often reserved and shy, but could express her opinion clearly in various situations. After Lacey stopped attending school at the age of 14, the connection between the friends was severed, and her classmate hardly heard anything about Lacey anymore. However, on one occasion, she cannot remember who told her. She learned that Lacey regularly visited psychologists during her teenage years, which was somewhat unusual at the time, as most visits to psychologists occurred for serious reasons. A neighbor of the Fletcher family named Robert said in 2022 that he saw Lacey about 15 years ago, when she was just over 20. At that time, the grown-up girl occasionally spent time with his younger brother as their homes were adjacent. Even then, Robert noticed that she was different from people her age. She simply had different interests. While other girls went to parties, consumed alcohol, or were interested in boys, Lacey preferred to watch Disney movies alone. Overall, at the age of 14, the girl seemed more withdrawn. She ventured outside less and less, stopped communicating with the neighbor's brother, and was no longer seen. Everyone assumed that either the family had moved somewhere else or Lacey had been sent to study elsewhere. But that was not the case. If someone had known that Lacey had been living in her parents' home all those years, it might have been possible to save her. In May 2017, Robert met with Lacey's father and inquired about the girl's fate, wanting to know how she was doing, if she had moved somewhere, and how her life was unfolding, where she was studying and what she was studying. But Lacey's father replied that she was fine, still living at home, and then quickly changed the subject. This already seemed strange to the neighbor because at that time, the girl should have been in her early 30s and living nearby. Even without delving into someone else's life, there was still the opportunity to see how those who lived nearby took out the trash or came and went somewhere. However, no one had seen Lacey all those years, and this strange evasion from her father left the neighbor suspicious. In January 2022 at 2:30 a.m., a call was made to the local police station. It was Lacey's mother, Sheila Fletcher, her voice filled with distress, reporting that her daughter had stopped breathing. The police immediately rushed to their home to provide assistance, and the coroner's office was notified. When the authorities entered the house, they were hit by a repugnant odor, a stench of decay and feces that made it unbearable to breathe. Later, the coroner would say that throughout his professional career, he had never encountered anything more horrifying than this smell, and for a week, he could not eat properly due to nausea. This man, who had worked as a doctor and coroner for 30 years, had seen various accidents and unfortunate incidents, but what he witnessed at the Fletcher's home shocked and horrified him. The sheriff of the police was also completely bewildered, looking at the scene in the living room where Lacey lay on the couch. At first glance, one could tell that she was around 30 years old, but her appearance was unkempt. Upon closer inspection, it was discovered that Lacey weighed only 96 pounds, severely emaciated. She wore only a t-shirt, which was pulled up above her chest. Her eyes were wide open, and her hair was completely tangled, resembling a dense woven mat that ended up on her head and was impossible to comb. Her entire body was covered in feces, even in her ears, and waste material was found in her eyes and mouth. Bed sores were found all over her body, some of them festering and some so deep that they reached the bones. Bed sores typically occur in those who are bedridden due to illness. Lacey's body was marked with brown spots and bed sores, and her buttocks were completely deformed with patches of missing skin. Lacey was infested with insect larvae that lived in various parts of her body, causing unimaginable suffering. The photos taken at the time were never published in the media or on the internet, as they were simply too horrifying and could be traumatizing for people. Even the coroner and the police officers who arrived on the scene had a hard time recovering from what they saw. However, there is a publicly available photograph of the couch on which Lacey died. This piece of furniture was completely destroyed, rotten away, and where Lacey lay, a huge hole formed in which human remains, pieces of skin, pus, and feces were discovered. Even the wooden floor beneath the couch was covered in all of this and began to rot. During the autopsy, the coroner found remnants of foam from the couch upholstery in Lacey's stomach. Apparently, she was so hungry that she began to eat the couch. The cause of Lacey's death was multifactorial, meaning that her death resulted from a combination of many factors, including the neglected bed sores that required urgent treatment, bone inflammation, and blood infection. When Lacey was found, her mother, Sheila, was sitting with her on the couch, crying, and her father, Clay, looked utterly devastated. Naturally, the investigators had numerous questions about how a person could end up in such a condition. When did neglect begin? And why did the parents, who lived in Lacey's home, do nothing and allow things to escalate to such an extent? Initially, the girl's parents did not want to publicly comment on the matter. Later, her mother testified that Lacey had been growing more and more distant from them, and when she turned 20, she simply refused to leave the house. She had no interest. At some point, Lacey refused to get up from the couch, prompting her parents to seek medical help. However, they consulted a doctor without Lacey present, as she refused to leave the house. This doctor advised them to take the girl to the hospital, but Lacey did not want to go anywhere, and her parents did not know what to do next. Her condition worsened, and at some point, Lacey even stopped getting up to use the bathroom. She began relieving herself in a towel that her mother placed near the couch, and sometimes it happened right in bed. The girl silently and aloofly lay on soiled bedding. Lacey's mother mentioned that she constantly brought her daughter food and drinks and tried to tend to her wounds, which resulted from her constant lying on the couch. Lacey never complained of pain and remained in her right mind until the end. When Lacey suddenly stopped breathing, her mother called emergency services, but it was already too late. There were rumors that it was a neighbor who compelled Lacey's parents to make the call. This neighbor saw Lucy laying motionless through a window and realized that something was amiss. He told Lacey's mother to make the call, or else he would do it himself. However, the police did not confirm this information later. But as it is known, rumors do not arise out of thin air. They stem from a lack of information. It later became known that Lacey's parents were not at home at all in the days leading up to her death, nearly 2 days. During those days, their daughter remained hungry. Of course, it is possible that her mother placed some food on the couch, but still, no one cared for her during those days. The question arises, why didn't Lacey get up from the couch and help herself to something to eat, considering she was in her right mind? Some sources suggest that the girl suffered from locked-in syndrome, in which a person is fully conscious but almost completely paralyzed physically. Among other causes, this condition is due to damage to the brain. Overall, Lacey lived exclusively on the couch for over 12 years without getting up. In court, the jury members required medical assistance to make sense of the photographs of Lacey's body. When these photos were shown, complete silence filled the courtroom. Everyone present was simply shocked and could not believe what they saw. On May 2, 2022, Clay and Sheila Fletcher were charged with second-degree murder and initially sent to the East Feliciana prison. The parents repeatedly claimed their innocence and emphasized that their daughter Lacey was in her right mind until the end and could make her own decisions. On May 4th, the Fletchers were released on a $300,000 bond. The legal process did not end there. They were tried in February 2023. It is inconceivable to imagine that parents left their daughter to decompose alive on a couch, doing nothing and taking no action. They even watched television together in the same room in the evenings. That is, the couch on which Lacey lay was in the family's living room, and in the evenings, the parents watched movies while their daughter lay nearby in such a state. It is simply unthinkable, as the stench of feces and decay permeated the entire house and was unbearable. Yet, the parents continued to live there and lead a normal life. Lacey looked unwell, and her parents continued to behave as if nothing was wrong. There are other horrifying details that have not been made public. People familiar with this story still wonder how such a thing could happen. Was it a cunning process that lasted for 12 years, with Lacey once lying down on the couch and her condition gradually deteriorating more and more? Of course, her bed sores did not appear yesterday or today. They developed over a prolonged period of time. Let's assume that someone's child declares that they will no longer go to the bathroom. How can one let that go unchecked and dismiss it? Even if Lacey was an adult, there must have been a way to place her in some institution at the very least, where she could receive help, even if it was forced. Of course, this requires significant financial investment, and it is hard to believe that Lacey's parents did not have the means for such medical care. They had steady jobs and earned a decent income. They had a large house in a good residential area, and it seemed they were not drowning in debt, as they quickly raised $300,000 for their bail. It is difficult to believe that the parents could not find the means to provide psychological assistance to the daughter. It appears that the girl refused treatment in her early teenage years. But why and at what point did everything come to a halt? No one can say what was going on in the minds of Lacey's parents or in her own mind. But the fact remains that a healthy person would not willingly spend their life on a couch. That much is clear. Something must have happened in Lacey's mind, and it was difficult or impossible for her parents to reach her, or perhaps they simply did not want to deal with her. Lacey's parents were initially charged with involuntary manslaughter, but ultimately the charge was replaced with second-degree murder. Later, the Fletchers, who had been released on bail, were arrested again on June 19th, and a grand jury once again indicted them for murder. According to the district attorney's office, we will ensure justice, and the public will know that guardians will be held accountable for negligence or cruel treatment of a person under their care, the prosecutor's statement said. Hello everyone. Now, we're going to look at another horrific case involving blind rage. Did you know that as the Christmas season approaches, the number of incidents increases? Crimes, assaults, and robberies rise. Law enforcement agents report hundreds of crimes over the Christmas and New Year's holidays. What is this fact related to? For starters, the celebrations are accompanied by copious amounts of alcohol. People lose track of how much they drink, obliterating previously established behavioral limitations. Even people who have never perpetrated crimes before lose control. Individuals with mental disorders can also be affected. When the attitude of unity, peace, and love pervades all around them, this segment of society feels particularly lonely and melancholy. Sociopaths compensate for their moral failings by engaging in illegal behavior. In this way, people address long-standing internal and external disputes. Ella Edwards, 26, died on January 25, 2022. Her funeral was held at St. Nicholas Church in Wallasey, Merseyside. Several hundred people gathered to see this gorgeous young woman off on her final journey. The young woman's body was then transported on a carriage pulled by 4 white horses. The family and siblings were unable to comprehend her abrupt and ludicrous death. The cold-blooded crime, which took place in front of everyone, remained on the minds of worried individuals for quite some time. A man stopped in the parking lot of the Beacon Bar in Wallasey on Christmas Eve. The local restaurant had a distinct taste and was bustling with activity for hours. The visitor stared at the establishment's entrance, believing that now was the best time to exact revenge. Many people's attention would be diverted in the days leading up to the festivities. This meant that if he carried out his plan, he would be able to escape undetected. When the target finally appeared, he fired with satisfaction. The criminal started the automobile and fled the scene. On December 24, 2022, there was no indication of problems. The city's atmosphere was magical. Everyone was getting ready for the forthcoming holiday. The streets were not overcrowded. Some residents were actively browsing stores to find missing things. Those who had not yet purchased gifts wandered through retail malls. However, the majority of individuals remained at home with their families. Christmas is a season of gatherings and comfortable company. The Edwards family was similarly caught up in the pre-holiday frenzy. Everyone was waiting for Lucy, one of the family's daughters, to spend the impending holidays with her family. The girl flew in from Dubai. Her sister Ella was particularly looking forward to Lucy's return. Despite the thousands of miles that separated them, they remained close in spirit. When the wonderful moment of meeting happened, the girls decided to meet up with friends at the neighborhood bar, Beacon. They had a terrific time. They danced, sang karaoke, and laughed. It was calmer and more tranquil than ever before. However, the widespread merriment was interrupted by loud clapping. "Are there fireworks?" someone asked in the crowd. No, someone's lunacy ruined the celebratory environment. At 11:50 p.m., 12 gunshots were fired at the pub's entrance. The bullets struck 5 people, 4 men and 1 woman. Ella Edwards had 2 bullet wounds to her head. Someone who was familiar with her tried to give her artificial respiration, but it was ineffective. Ella's condition was deteriorating. The injuries were really severe. After phoning 911, ambulances arrived at the location of the shooting. After examining the victim, the medics reached a preliminary conclusion. The 22-year-old sustained leg injuries, the 24-year-old was shot in the arm, and the 33-year-old man's wrist was hurt. Ella, 26, and a man, 28, were both in critical condition. The sad woman died on the route to the hospital after losing consciousness. Miss Edwards' injuries made it impossible for her to live. Ella had spoken with her father just a few hours before the crime. Tim Edwards subsequently remembered, "I was busy with Christmas preparations when the police reported what had happened. It came as a huge shock to our family. Everyone who knew Ella struggled to believe what had occurred. After all, she was so young and gorgeous. For her untimely death, did she truly have ill-wishers in her entourage who were capable of such an act?" Ella Edwards was a stunningly attractive and pleasant young lady. She worked as a beautician in a local beauty salon and part-time as a dental assistant. Despite her young age, she was well established and had a respectable income. She was very goal-oriented and didn't want to rest on her laurels. Ella was not denied male attention. Nature rewarded her with exceptional external beauty. Her friends observed that, in addition to her exterior attractiveness, her inner beauty shone through. She was quite pleasant and optimistic. Miss Edwards' personality enabled her to find common ground with even the most erratic customers, resulting in a positive relationship with management. The young woman looked forward to a bright future because she loved beauty and makeup. However, life dictated otherwise. There were no hints throughout the initial stages of the investigation. The invader attacked abruptly. As he vanished from the crime scene, he left behind shell casings and bleeding victims. Detectives knew one thing for certain: the attack was premeditated. Police required time to assess if Ella was the intended target of the attack or a random victim. For the most part, law enforcement officers believed the girl was one of the victims by mistake. Detectives spoke with the victim's family to have a better grasp of her personality and the specifics of her life. Everyone spoke highly about Ella and did not understand how someone could have purposely attacked her. According to their remarks, the deceased had no enemies. Ella was stunningly lovely. Perhaps there were people who envied her or desired to be near her. However, the crime is unlikely to have been motivated by envy or jealousy. The Edwards family statements fueled the police's speculation. It is not uncommon in the city to witness conflict between opposing criminal groups. Innocent persons have occasionally been injured as a result of their usage of guns. Afterward, the victims and witnesses to the incident were interviewed. It took a while to check cell phone service. Officers also obtained CCTV footage from the pub. The inquiry aimed to evaluate them. The authorities have also contacted the media. They urged anyone with information to help bring those guilty to justice. Above all, this entailed releasing video footage from mobile devices captured on the night of the incident. Any of them could indicate the vehicle in which the attacker came. City authorities met with local people. First and foremost, they wished to support and reassure anxious citizens. The meeting's next goal was to persuade eyewitnesses to provide the evidence they possessed. It was probable that someone witnessed the crime or knew the offender. A group of volunteer activists was formed who went door to door and spoke with citizens. The work did not take long to produce results. It was quickly determined that the attacker had departed the pub parking lot in a dark Mercedes. CCTV cameras also revealed that after pulling up to the establishment, the officer waited for some time. Apparently, he was picking the most convenient time to attack. When Ella and other young people were outside, he opened fire. After that, he swiftly got into his car and sped off. It was easy to determine the time of the crime and that the attacker was alone. However, it was impossible to tell where the intruder fled. So, detectives went door to door interviewing residents in an attempt to identify the perpetrator. They detailed the vehicle and the circumstances surrounding the occurrence. The city streets were patrolled around the clock. The murdered girl's future took place on December 25th. Despite the fact that it was Christmas Day, the venue of the victim's final funeral was closed in honor of the victim's memory and suffering. The Beacon Pub's proprietor published a comment on his social media website expressing his support for Ella Edwards' family. On the same day, her father left flowers at the establishment's door. He whispered, "My beautiful Ella, the light of my life, you will always be with us." Already on December 26th, two people were apprehended. They were a 19-year-old Rock Ferry resident and a 30-year-old Tranmere male. The woman was arrested on charges of conspiring to commit a felony. 2 days later, another Tranmere resident was arrested. The 31-year-old man was also accused of conspiring to commit a felony. At the same time of his arrest, the two previous arrestees remained at the station. The detainees' names were not revealed due to a lack of direct evidence. All three were quickly released. The authorities were unable to substantiate their involvement in the crime. The residents were outraged by the rampant criminality and the police's inability to control it. As a result, the detectives had to give another statement. They stated that the inquiry would continue until the culprit was identified and punished. It was still considered that the shooting at the Beacon pub was the result of a rivalry between local criminal groups, and the unfortunate Ella Edwards was viewed as a random victim. On December 30th, law enforcement stated that the three male victims had been released from the hospital, and the badly injured 28-year-old's health had finally returned to normal. On January 3rd, 2023, police stated that approximately 150 pieces of data were obtained throughout the inquiry. Among them was some crucial information. It was discovered that the gunshots fired at an unknown individual may have been intended for Jake Duffy and Kieran Salkeld. The lads were members of a local gang. The gang could not coexist in a territory where illegal narcotics are traded with a competing clan, according to information gathered from enclosed sources. The two did not see the battle as a serious danger to their gang. As a result, the bandits decided to take a vacation in Mayak the following day. By their presence, they put the other visitors in the gunmen's sights. At the same time, video surveillance equipment allowed authorities to trace the car in which the perpetrator fled the crime scene. However, the intruder got ahead of the detectives. New Year's Eve proved to be as tumultuous as Christmas. The police station received a report of a fire near the Beacon pub. Where cops arrived at the area, they discovered a car that fit the description of the sought vehicle. Despite the fact that the vehicle was fully burned out, the analysis revealed its identification. Apparently, the offender was aware that the police were on his trail, so he set fire to the car to destroy the evidence. It was also determined that the car had been stolen. The total number of people implicated in the murder was revealed on January 11th. Edwards claimed that 5 detectives announced the arrest of a 22-year-old man, a 23-year-old man, and a 23-year-old woman from Wool. On January 13th, police announced the arrest of the shooter. He turned out to be Connor Chapman. Despite his youth, the youngster was well known to authorities and the criminal community. He had a long history of robberies, hooliganism, threatening behavior, and aggravated carjackings. The last crime made headlines in numerous newspapers. In the current instance, he faces multiple charges. The 23-year-old woman in custody was freed on bail. The investigation continues. It turned out that on the afternoon of December 24th, there was a fight between two opposing factions near a wooden church in Beechwood. The altercation was extremely violent, and no compromise was made. Chapman discovered that several of his opponents were enjoying Christmas Eve at a neighborhood business, instead of spending his first Christmas away from prison in 4 years with his family. Connor chose retribution. Ella Edwards was indeed at the wrong place at the wrong time, and Chapman was not acting alone. Investigators discovered the identity of another defendant in the case, 20-year-old Thomas Waring. He was taken into custody and charged with possessing guns and helping a criminal. A search for Thomas's residence yielded considerable evidence for the investigation, including a videotape from before the incident showing Connor taking up a rifle and claiming he was going to get even with someone. Following the shooting, the culprits hid the stolen automobile. Later, to muddle the investigation, they called a cab using an assumed identity. Around 5 a.m., the crooks returned to the location where they had buried the Mercedes. They chose to remove the direct evidence in the case rather than wasting time erasing traces. Connor Chapman's identity was criminalized from an early age. Born in Birkenhead, Liverpool, he was raised by his grandparents. Abandoned by his parents at a young age, the adolescent studied inadequately and dropped out of school just before his exams. Connor had always been a difficult child. As a result, neither teachers nor relatives had high expectations for him. Chapman's first crime was shoplifting at the age of 14. In 2016, he conducted a carjacking, and in 2017, another theft was combined with possession of a restricted drug. Chapman had been under police surveillance and subject to restraining orders from the previous 2 years. However, he was more than willing to break the rules. He was eventually regarded as a threat to the community, and therefore he was denied entry to some areas of the city. In 2018, he breached the prohibition again, carrying a weapon and illegal substances. That same year, the public learned about him for the first time when his lame justification for stealing an automobile became a local anecdote. 18-year-old Connor had no intention of staying on the straight and narrow. The last time he stole an Audi, a patrolman on the streets of the city observed the stolen car and told the driver to halt. However, Chapman had no intention of following the officer's orders. He hit the gas with all his power and started a chase. Along the way, the man committed numerous traffic infractions and ended up colliding with a curb. The car was thrown sideways and whirled around. As a result, the carjacker had to leave the cabin. The runner was apprehended after traveling only a short distance. The patrol caught up to Connor in the bushes. In his defense, he stated that he was expecting a buddy. His sentence eventually became a catchphrase at trial. The defense fought hard for Chapman's freedom, claiming that the defendant was under the influence of bad company and that he was diagnosed with ADD and a variety of other mental illnesses. This report was issued by a private specialist. During the trial, the lawyer maintained that Connor was innocent and should be released. Thus, he was sentenced to 8 months in juvenile prison and issued a driving ban. This was a relatively light sentence for a serial offender with 14 convictions for 30 criminal incidents. The young offender evidently had no intention of stopping and defied all societal norms. In January 2020, Connor faced another trial, this time receiving a 10-month prison sentence after being found in public with prohibited narcotics in his pocket. After seeing his term, he was arrested for 5 additional charges. At the same time, Chapman boasted about his questionable accomplishments, boldly stating that he had spent more time in prison than on the outside. By the age of 20, he had acquired 19 convictions for 43 offenses, 6 months before the horrible occurrence at the Beacon pub. Connor was tried again. The lawyer argued that the client had comprehended everything and was now ready to reform. Chapman validated the words of the ruse. The lawyer noted Connor's girlfriend's upcoming birth as one of the mitigating circumstances, pressing on pity and stating that the first child was born while the man was in prison. At the time of his last trial, the police were aware that Connor was a member of a gang and sold illegal drugs. However, he was simply charged with burglarizing a house and stealing a couple of electric motorcycles. Perhaps there was some corruption involved in this instance. At the very least, the high-priced lawyer worked off his costs. Amazingly, everyone knew the person was dangerous. Law enforcement officials once issued a statement on television warning the public to be aware of Connor. After committing a crime, he would complete a sentence and be released. It's a nasty criminal cycle. However, there was no compelling basis for Chapman's isolation. Most likely, it was because his acts did not do substantial harm to anyone. The people were outraged by the flaws in the law. It seemed like nothing could be done to harden penalties until offenders injured or killed someone. On June 13, 2023, Connor Chapman's trial began in Liverpool Crown Court. 12 members of the Edwards family participated. Nigel Power, the prosecutor, announced the charges against the defendant. Chapman pleaded not guilty to all charges. He sought to deny that he had been caught on CCTV. Connor claimed that on the night of the incident, he was at home wrapping presents. He was also vague regarding the stolen vehicle. Initially, he denied taking the Mercedes, saying the automobile belonged to his gang. Later, he stated that he destroyed it after discovering that one of his associates had committed a crime using the vehicle. Because enough evidence had been gathered, his falsehood was clear. The trial lasted 3.5 weeks, during which all the details of the crime were determined. The true motive for the shooting on December 24th in a local pub was rage and revenge, which Chapman was unable to manage. In reality, he didn't care who got in his way. During the murder of Jake Duffy and Karen Soule, members of a rival gang, he obtained a Scorpion submachine gun. The weapon could fire around 15 bullets in less than a second. Connor stepped into the stolen vehicle and drove to the Beacon, conducting 3 hours of monitoring before firing the shots. Meanwhile, the security camera showed Ella cheerfully interacting with her friends. She even left momentarily to visit another pub before returning home with her sister, Lucy, at 11:47 p.m. She returned outside to smoke. Unfortunately, she found herself close to Chapman's targets. At the moment, Connor was only in the parking lot. His long brown hair was visible on camera, and his face was concealed by a hood or a balaclava. A little while later, as he headed towards the car to flee, he fired 12 shots. The ensuing wound knocked Ella out and caused her to fall on top of Selt. As a result, Ella Edwards received bullets that were not intended for her. Following the attack, Connor planned to travel to Spain, but was apprehended by police at the airport. To conceal their tracks, Chapman and Waring set fire to the automobile and destroyed the weapon, which was never discovered. However, traces of Connor's DNA were found on one of the cartridge casings, implying that he loaded the gun before firing. During the investigation of his home, red gloves were discovered that were plainly seen on the pub's CCTV tape. They were also determined to contain his DNA. All of this data tied Chapman to the atrocity that occurred. By the way, while the culprit was awaiting punishment, both of his attack victims were in prison. Tim Edwards was given the opportunity to speak before the jury of 5 men and 7 women began deliberating on the judgment. He said he had been forced to examine CCTV footage prior to the trial. "It's terrible to see your daughter die and not be able to stop it. I'll never forget it," the father reported. Ellie was on the street with her back to the offender. He further stated that if the gunfire had come 6 inches higher or to the side, his daughter would still be alive. The father hoped that the ultimate verdict would be fair and that the offender would never again be able to spend Christmas with his family. While on the run, it took the judges 3 hours to reach a unanimous ruling on July 7, 2023. Connor Chapman was sentenced to life in prison with a 48-year parole period. The Edwards family was relieved that the cold-blooded killer would be incarcerated for the rest of his life. The criminal committed the crime with cynicism and had no intention of repenting. The trial established that the bar shooting was the result of a conflict between the Wood Church and Beechwood Estate gangs. On each side of the M53, Thomas Waring was likewise found guilty of all allegations brought against him. The court condemned him for 9 years in prison. In the same month, unlike Chapman, the lad had minimal criminal experience, which likely contributed to his short sentence. The people were outraged. Innocent persons were once again involved in criminal confrontations. They were even furious because potentially deadly gang members were frequently sentenced to short prison terms. Court utilized prohibitions as supplementary sanctions, which have little effect. This was notably clear in the instance of Connor Chapman. The lad was prohibiting from being on the premises when the tavern was located, as well as from driving. They were ineffective in ensuring public safety. The death of L. Edwards was proof of that. The incident emphasized the necessity for a revision of the current legislative framework. Furthermore, the bold attack emphasized the issue of handgun availability, following multiple such deaths in the county of Merseyside. The government has set aside $350,000 to launch a trial initiative. It is connected to a reduction in gun crime in the region. Tim Edwards also announced the creation of a fund to help victims of gun violence. One of the primary priorities of national authorities should be to minimize the number of firearms in the hands of individuals and criminal organizations. Father L. voiced his opinions. He further stated that carrying guns, especially among minors, is becoming the norm. The younger generation is very sensitive to what they see and hear. Mr. Edwards noted that during his upbringing, he never heard of any of the kids picking up a gun, let alone knowing where to buy one. According to him, everyone in today's culture is quite vulnerable. People are not safe anyplace. An attack can occur in a private residence, on the street, or in a busy location. A notable example of this was the Christmas Eve party at the Beacon Pub in 2022. It should have been a time of joy and warmth, but it developed into an irreversible disaster.
Hello everyone, this is the Criminal Mindscape channel, and today we're delving into another distressing case. In many instances, addiction isn't the end of the road. Numerous individuals, including former alcoholics, manage to conquer their struggles, reintegrate into society, form families, and extend support to others facing similar challenges. Such is the trajectory of Nicole Pitts, whose promising life took a tragic turn. The saga surrounding Nicole commenced in King County, Washington in 1973, on February 26th. Despite the fractured union of her parents during her schooling years, Nicole seemed destined for a bright future. Yet her journey unraveled into a tangled web of events, culminating in a 6-year investigation into a heinous crime that ultimately landed a suspect in the dock. Another year elapsed in court proceedings to secure the perpetrator's conviction and ensure the longest possible incarceration. Initially appearing meticulously orchestrated, this crime concealed within it many details that, over the years of meticulous investigation, coalesced into a comprehensive narrative. The culprit, buoyed by a false sense of impunity, lived a life untouched by justice until the accumulated evidence shattered his facade. Let's dissect this intricate tale, beginning with the enigmatic figure of Nicole Pitts. Nicole blossomed into an active and sociable child, thriving in sports and earning a reputation as a genuine charmer with an abundance of friends. She relished trips to the countryside, with Lake Sammamish near Seattle emerging as her cherished summer retreat. Following her high school graduation, Nicole embarked on a journey to Western Washington College, immersing herself in public relations studies while maintaining her passion for athletics. Simultaneously, she leveraged her fitness prowess by securing a position as a trainer at a local sports club, rapidly earning respect among peers and amassing a loyal clientele for her group classes. Nicole's ambition soared. Concurrently, she pursued further education and management, eventually landing a job at a prominent mobile communications company. Outwardly affable and always ready to lend a hand, Nicole concealed a profound struggle behind her facade of well-being. The trauma of her parents' divorce during her formative years inflicted deep wounds on her psyche. Coupled with a rebellious streak and the allure of negative influences, Nicole sought solace in alcohol, spiraling into a debilitating addiction that persisted for years, eroding her physical and mental well-being. Amidst her tumultuous battle, Nicole's mother, Gail, a flight attendant with a demanding schedule, initially remained unaware of her daughter's plight. Living with her elderly grandmother, Nicole's clandestine struggle escaped immediate notice. However, upon discovery, Gail, despite her own challenges, rallied to support her daughter. Together, they embarked on a journey of therapy and Alcoholic Anonymous meetings. Gail's partner, Rod, standing steadfast in his encouragement, treated Nicole as his own, believing fervently in her ability to overcome her affliction. Nicole approached therapy with dedication, attending every session and swiftly conquering her addiction. Nonetheless, the toll of alcohol on her health was significant. She developed severe pancreatic issues, necessitating surgery. Moreover, the early onset of alcohol abuse detrimentally impacted her reproductive health, rendering her unable to conceive. In the mid-90s, having emerged from the shadows of addiction and embracing sobriety, Nicole crossed paths with her future husband, David. At the time, she had just commenced her role as a coach at a sports club where David, a tall and dashing regular attendee, caught her eye. Their mutual attraction blossomed into a romance, undeterred by the 4-year age gap between them. For nearly 8 years, they nurtured their relationship until tying the knot in 2002, opting for a simple yet elegant ceremony in Hawaii, attended solely by their closest confidants. The newlyweds settled in the serene town of Linwood, Washington, embarking on their shared journey together. After purchasing their own house, Nicole and David gradually settled into a comfortable routine. Nicole, known for her sociable and amicable nature, quickly forged friendships and fostered warm relationships with their neighbors. Her fondness for animals led to the adoption of several dogs, channeling her maternal instincts towards caring for her beloved pets. Given her inability to have children, according to neighbors, David and Nicole epitomized the ideal married couple, often seen together walking their dogs and exuding happiness. Nicole's culinary prowess added to their domestic bliss, delighting David with her delectable home-cooked meals and impressing guests with her culinary creations. However, in 2006, just days before her 33rd birthday, Nicole mysteriously vanished. Her absence raised immediate concern when she failed to attend the AA Society meeting where she served as a leader and inspiration. Likewise, her absence from work alarmed colleagues. As the day wore on without any contact, Gail, Nicole's mother, grew increasingly worried. Unable to reach her daughter, David, although aware of a disagreement with Nicole the day before, initially attributed her absence to lingering resentment. Consequently, he delayed reaching out until evening to reconcile. As the evening progressed with no sign of Nicole's return and her phone remaining unanswered, the family's anxiety intensified. Despite their pleas, the police initially dismissed their concerns, citing Nicole's status as an adult and the brief duration since her disappearance. However, when Nicole failed to reappear and remained unreachable the following day, authorities finally initiated a search, commencing from the couple's residence where Nicole was last seen. Despite thorough investigation, no clues or anomalies were discovered at Nicole's residence, suggesting neither foul play nor signs of abduction. Coupled with the absence of her personal vehicle, which hinted at a voluntary departure with no intention of returning, two plausible scenarios emerged. The first speculated that Nicole, following a marital dispute, chose to leave or stage her absence to unsettle her husband. The second, posed by Nicole's peers and the alcohol addiction support group, suggested a relapse after years of sobriety, fueled by the misuse of potent painkillers prescribed for a back injury. Evidence supporting this theory included Nicole's recent consumption of excessive pain medication, potentially leading to a transition from prescribed drugs to alcohol. The most distressing conjecture, however, implied Nicole's demise as she failed to communicate any updates about her whereabouts. Despite the grim possibilities, Nicole's family clung to hope, refusing to accept the worst-case scenario and remaining optimistic about her safe return. Nicole's mother and stepfather refused to wait for the police's standard procedures and took immediate action, launching their own search efforts. They utilized social media platforms to mobilize community assistance, urging people to provide any relevant information about their missing daughter's whereabouts. Without hesitation, they boarded the first flight to Linwood, where they commenced their personal search, distributing flyers adorned with Nicole's photos and interviewing individuals who knew her personally. Concurrently, law enforcement scoured the area, not only for Nicole, but also for her vehicle, attempting to reconstruct its potential route on the day of her disappearance. However, as time passed, hope of Nicole's safe return dwindled, culminating in a tragic revelation a few days later. During a routine morning jog, a man stumbled upon the mutilated body of a young woman in a local park. The grim discovery prompted immediate notification to the authorities, who swiftly dispatched forensic experts to the scene. Upon arrival, investigators discerned evidence suggesting a violent crime, as the victim's naked body bore signs of severe physical trauma. The absence of clothing and the presence of numerous injuries indicated a brutal assault, with asphyxiation identified as the cause of death. With grim certainty, law enforcement confirmed the grim reality. Nicole had been murdered. Strangled by her assailant's bare hands, the absence of her vehicle led investigators to consider theft as the primary motive. However, the attacker chose to silence Nicole, potentially indicating a more sinister motive, such as assault. The police immediately suspected the body they found belongs to Nicole, who had been missing for days. Despite this assumption, her family had to formally identify her. When Gail laid eyes on her daughter's lifeless form in the morgue, she was overwhelmed, requiring medical assistance to cope with the shock. Rod, her husband, also appeared grief-stricken, but some found his demeanor peculiar. Meanwhile, as the search for Nicole's vehicle continued, law enforcement maintained their belief that the car held vital clues to the perpetrator's identity. Public appeals for information regarding the missing car yielded results weeks later when it was discovered abandoned in a city parking lot. The unassuming gray Volkswagen Polo went unnoticed by the guard, unaware of its connection to a tragic murder case. The police promptly seized the car for thorough examination and analysis, anticipating it to yield crucial evidence and vital clues pivotal for tracking down the perpetrator and reconstructing the crime scene. However, their hopes were dashed as the vehicle yielded nothing of significance. Absent were any traces of blood, signs of a struggle, or indications of a forced abduction. Inside the cabin, fingerprints and DNA samples were limited to Nicole and her husband, who occasionally used the car. Despite the absence of overt evidence, investigators remain hesitant to return the vehicle to David, convinced that crucial evidence lay beneath the surface. The undeniable truth remained. Nicole had been brutally murdered, yet the motive behind the crime remained elusive. The initial theory of carjacking lost credibility given the prompt abandonment of the vehicle across town, devoid of any signs of altercation. Similarly, the notion of sexual violence was refuted by forensic findings indicating no recent sexual activity. Attention turned to a potential personal motive or intense animosity harbored by the perpetrator towards the victim. This hypothesis was fueled by the severity of Nicole's injuries, suggestive of a frenzied attack. However, this theory was at odds with Nicole's amiable disposition and absence of known enemies or adversaries. The investigation thus faced a perplexing conundrum, grappling with the mystery of a heinous crime committed against a seemingly unassuming and benevolent individual. This perplexing case seemed destined to languish unsolved, with the investigation yielding no new leads or avenues for pursuing the culprit. After nearly a year, the circumstances surrounding the abandonment of the car in the sparsely populated parking lot added to the mystery, exacerbated by the absence of surveillance footage in the vicinity. A peculiar detail emerged. The driver of the car appeared significantly taller and larger than the victim, suggesting the involvement of an unidentified individual. Adding to the intrigue, the case was shrouded in secrecy, with authorities withholding vital information from the victim's family, leaving them in the dark regarding the progress of the investigation. Fragmentary updates provided little clarity, such as the revelation that Nicole's bank card had been used at a remote gas station following her disappearance, yet the footage obtained remained enigmatic. Desperate for answers and frustrated by the lack of progress, Nicole's parents took matters into their own hands, engaging a private detective to conduct an independent inquiry. Offering a substantial reward of $10,000 initially, later increased to $35,000, they sought to incentivize anyone with pertinent information to come forward. Despite their efforts, the case remained stagnant, with David's initial interest in the investigation waning after the first 6 months. Subsequently, David gradually distanced himself, ceasing communication with his in-laws and eventually remarrying, even fathering a child. This revelation dealt a heavy blow to Gail, compounded by David's constant reproach regarding her daughter's inability to conceive. Struggling with grief, Gail voiced suspicions towards her son-in-law, yet many dismissed her accusations as rooted in resentment. The police likewise seemed to disregard such conjectures entirely. An unexpected turn in the case emerged 6 years later when David was apprehended as the prime suspect, shocking many who had followed the investigation. However, Nicole's family and friends had harbored suspicion about him from the onset, openly discussing their doubts throughout the lengthy inquiry. While justice finally seemed within reach, David, who had since relocated and severed ties with Nicole's family, was taken aback by his arrest, believing the case long closed and his actions unnoticed. Maintaining his innocence, David agreed to undergo a polygraph test, which he failed miserably. Despite initial suspicions, the police lacked concrete evidence against him. To avoid spooking the culprit into hiding, they refrained from aggressive tactics, instead meticulously gathering evidence over the years to ensure a just outcome. David's belief in his foolproof crime crumbled as investigators scrutinized each anomaly, starting with surveillance footage from the gas station where Nicole's card had been used after her death. The surveillance footage indicated a man resembling David using Nicole's card, although obscured by a headdress and dark glasses, rendering positive identification impossible. Despite its limitations, this footage was included in the case file. Another anomaly was the absence of Nicole's wedding ring, initially presumed stolen. However, it was discovered within her home, contradicting theft suspicions. During the investigation, a dental mouth guard was found in Nicole's mouth, a recent prescription to alleviate teeth grinding caused by nervousness. This detail suggested that she was killed while asleep in her bed, explaining the absence of clothing, lack of resistance marks, and the pristine condition of her body. Additionally, Nicole's lack of makeup, which she habitually applied before leaving the house, supported this theory. Regarding the mouthguard, it was possible that David simply forgot about it, given Nicole's recent use of it. Furthermore, analysis of the driver's seat position in the abandoned car revealed anthropometric data consistent with David's. Moreover, only David and Nicole's fingerprints were found inside the vehicle, further implicating him in the investigation. If a third person had been present in the cabin, their traces would have been evident. Even if this individual had attempted to erase any evidence, it would have likely erased traces and prints of the car's owners as well. Additionally, a crucial discovery was facilitated by advancements in technology. Following the crime, the perpetrator utilized the victim's phone multiple times across various locations in the city. Remarkably, signals from David's phone coincided with these instances. Further scrutiny revealed that David harbored motives within the facade of their seemingly perfect family. While Nicole diligently balanced studies, dual employment, and aiding those battling addiction, her husband led a considerably idle lifestyle. David's transient employment history and frequent socializing in bars and clubs, often at the expense of his wife's earnings, exacerbated their financial strain. Despite Nicole's efforts to encourage David to seek help for his addiction by attending AA meetings, his dismissive attitude persisted. Compounding matters, David engaged in systematic infidelity, propositioning Nicole to join him in his liaisons, all of which she vehemently rejected. On one occasion, David even attempted to coerce her by getting her intoxicated. Gail, fully aware of the distress within her daughter's marriage, urged her to reconsider her situation. Despite Gail's interventions, the horrors within the family persisted. As the financial strain worsened, Nicole's attempts to steer David towards rehabilitation were met with ridicule and scorn. Furthermore, David's persistent infidelity and manipulative behavior only exacerbated their marital discord. However, she resisted taking this step because of her love for him and her hope that David would change. Yet, following Nicole's mysterious death, her husband swiftly pursued a substantial insurance payout and promptly initiated a new relationship. It was later uncovered that several months prior to the tragedy, David had been unfaithful with a woman named Jane, frequenting bars and clubs with her while Nicole was preoccupied with work or studies. Just before Nicole's birthday, David brazenly brought his mistress to their home, where they were unexpectedly discovered by Nicole upon her return. This incident sparked a heated family argument, prompting Nicole to confide in her mother, with whom she shared a close relationship. Suspicions initially fell on her son-in-law, but law enforcement deemed the evidence insufficient to warrant his arrest. Consequently, the case was classified and the family was left in the dark regarding any progress in the investigation. Over time, their hope for justice dwindled. Following David's reception of a significant insurance settlement following Nicole's demise, he lavished expenditures on Jane. Gail posited the theory that David's mistress might have been an accomplice to the crime, but lacking evidence, she was only brought in as a witness. David's trial commenced in September 2013, during which he vehemently denied any involvement in the tragedy. Initially, his defense team argued that the evidence against him was circumstantial and insufficient to establish guilt. However, as incriminating evidence mounted, the defense shifted tactics, endeavoring to portray David as a victim. They attempted to insinuate that Nicole's consumption of pain medication following her back injury had led her to relapse into alcoholism, making her husband's life intolerable. These claims were refuted by those who knew Nicole, and even if true, they could not justify David's heinous actions. Ultimately, David was convicted of his crimes and sentenced to the maximum term allowable by the law in the state where the trial occurred, 18 years in prison. However, he may be eligible for parole in 2025 after serving 2/3 of his sentence. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned to the Criminal Mindscape channel for more compelling stories.
In a picturesque town, a woman named Amanda Everwood stood out with her striking chestnut hair and captivating blue eyes. She embodied grace and creativity, a trait inherited from her family of artists. The aroma of oil paints and the sight of canvases in progress filled her childhood home. Amanda's mother bestowed her with artistic talent, while her father instilled in her an unyielding determination. As a result, she quickly garnered recognition as an extraordinary landscape artist, captivating audiences with her vibrant color palette and her ability to capture nature's essence. Conversely, Richard Everwood hailed from a distinguished lineage of legal professionals. The Everwood family boasted generations of judges, attorneys, and legal scholars, and Richard was no exception. He thrived in law school, graduating at the top of his class, and swiftly ascended the ranks at a prestigious Belleville law firm. Richard's charm, handsome appearance, and keen intellect made him a formidable lawyer and an attractive husband. Their worlds collided during their sophomore year of college, a quintessential example of opposites attracting. Amanda's free-spirited nature harmonized with Richard's structured and disciplined lifestyle. Love blossomed between them amidst late-night study sessions, gallery openings, and summer road trips. Upon graduation, they exchanged vows in a lavish ceremony that became the talk of Belleville. They established their home in a beautiful Victorian house that Amanda adored, transforming it into a sanctuary filled with art, music, and love. The house boasted a spacious garden where Amanda frequently painted, drawing inspiration from the colorful flowers and the shifting seasons. Richard, however, was deeply committed to his work, often spending long hours at the office. Together, they welcomed a son named Ethan, who became the apple of Amanda's eye. On the surface, their life appeared idyllic. Amanda's days were filled with painting, volunteering at the local art center, and caring for Ethan. Richard's career continued to prosper, eventually earning him a partnership at his firm. They graced glamorous parties and charity events, often becoming the center of attention. However, as time passed, Amanda detected subtle changes in Richard. He grew increasingly distant, frequently arriving home late and departing early in the morning. The once affectionate and warm man she married had become cold and preoccupied. Amanda endeavored to disregard the shifts in their relationship, attributing them to the pressures of Richard's high-powered career. However, the nagging suspicion that lingered in her mind intensified with each passing day. Carla Rowe entered their lives when Richard employed her as his personal assistant. Carla was a vision of beauty, with her dark, flowing hair, striking features, and an air of self-assurance that captivated everyone she encountered. She was competent, intelligent, and seemed to comprehend Richard in a manner that Amanda found elusive. It wasn't long before Amanda's doubts centered around Carla. One fateful evening, Amanda resolved to confront Richard. She arranged a romantic, candle-lit dinner, hoping to rekindle their connection and encourage him to confide in her. As they sat facing each other at the dining table, Amanda revealed her apprehensions and fears. Richard listened attentively but brushed off her concerns, attributing his behavior to the demands of his job. He reassured her that there was no cause for alarm, yet Amanda remained unconvinced. Driven to unveil the truth, Amanda enlisted the services of a private investigator named Mark Collins. Mark was a seasoned expert with a reputation for discretion and meticulousness. Over the course of several weeks, he shadowed Richard and Carla, recording their exchanges. The evidence he amassed was incriminating: late-night meals, weekend getaways, and intimate moments that left no room for uncertainty. Richard was engaged in an affair with Carla. Amanda grappled with a whirlwind of emotions: fury, deception, and profound sorrow. She couldn't fathom how Richard could jeopardize their family in such a manner. Yet amidst her turmoil, she also experienced an unexpected sense of relief. At last, she possessed the truth, and she could determine her next steps. Equipped with the evidence, Amanda's initial despair paved the way for unwavering determination. She chose to confront Carla first, seeking to obtain more information before addressing Richard. Amanda orchestrated a rendezvous under the guise of discussing a philanthropic event sponsored by Richard's firm. Carla, oblivious to Amanda's true motives, consented to meet at a fashionable cafe nestled in the heart of the city. The cafe exuded a warm, intimate ambiance, enhanced by its soft lighting and luxurious seating. Amanda arrived ahead of schedule, selecting a secluded corner table that offered privacy for their conversation. A few minutes later, Carla entered the establishment, radiating self-assurance and grace as she approached the table. Amanda found herself experiencing a blend of curiosity and resentment. Carla extended a cordial greeting to Amanda, commenting on the enchanting atmosphere of the cafe. Amanda, concealing her true emotions, responded courteously and directed the conversation towards Richard. She mentioned his increased time spent at the office and inquired about his ability to manage the workload. Carla replied that Richard's dedication was unparalleled, and the cases he handled demanded considerable time and focus. Amanda then leaned closer, lowering her voice to reveal her knowledge of the affair. Carla's complexion lost its color, and she attempted to respond, but Amanda interjected, clarifying that she was not there to cast blame or accusations. Amanda simply sought to comprehend the reasons behind the infidelity. Carla, with tears welling in her eyes, recounted the story that began a few years prior when Richard faced challenges at work. They started spending more time together, and one event led to another. As Carla divulged the details, Amanda felt an unexpected sense of empathy. She recognized the anguish in Carla's eyes, a mirror of her own inner turmoil. By the conclusion of their conversation, an unanticipated bond had formed between them. Amanda found herself drawn to Carla's intellect and charisma, while Carla discovered comfort in Amanda's empathy and understanding. In the ensuing weeks, Amanda and Carla clandestinely continued their meetings. What initially began as a confrontation evolved into a multifaceted relationship. Their encounters grew more frequent, and their connection deepened. One evening, Carla extended an invitation to Amanda to visit her apartment, ostensibly to examine documents pertaining to the charity event. The apartment boasted a chic, contemporary design with floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased a breathtaking view of the city. As they reclined on the sofa, sipping wine and engaging in conversation, the air between them thickened with tension. Carla placed her glass aside and gazed into Amanda's eyes, confessing her burgeoning feelings. Amanda's heart pounded, for she too harbored similar sentiments, but had been hesitant to acknowledge them. She admitted her reciprocal feelings, and their lips met in a fervent embrace, marking the transition from emotional connection to physical intimacy that night. Their clandestine affair unfolded with intensity, a tempest of furtive moments and concealed trysts. Amanda felt invigorated in a manner she hadn't experienced in years, yet guilt and fear persistently gnawed at her. They sought refuge in the city's secluded nooks, concealed corners of parks, obscure cafes, and Carla's apartment, where they believed they were shielded from the world's scrutiny. Their discussions spanned profound philosophical debates to playful exchanges, revealing their hopes, aspirations, and apprehensions, and forging a connection that transcended physical desire. However, Amanda remained acutely conscious of the fragility of their circumstances. She recognized the dire repercussions that would ensue if Richard discovered their secret. Despite this, she found herself incapable of terminating the affair. Carla had become an indispensable presence in her life, filling a void she had been previously unaware of. Richard's suspicions mounted as he detected changes in Amanda's behavior. She seemed more distant, frequently preoccupied, and radiated a newfound self-assurance. Richard's paranoia drove him to install a concealed camera in Carla's apartment, suspecting that Amanda might have uncovered his infidelity and was orchestrating a scheme against him. Upon reviewing the footage and witnessing his wife with Carla, Richard's fury and sense of betrayal erupted. He felt emasculated and humiliated, convinced that both women had collaborated to deceive him. Richard embarked on a methodical plan to exact revenge, determined to reclaim control over his life. On a tempestuous night, Richard summoned Amanda to his office under the guise of desiring to discuss their relationship and explore a path forward. Amanda, hopeful for reconciliation, consented. Upon entering Richard's dimly illuminated office, Amanda was taken aback by the icy audacity in his gaze. Richard instructed her to sit, his tone devoid of feeling. Amanda complied, her heart racing. As she attempted to speak, Richard interrupted her, forcefully throwing a folder of compromising photographs onto the desk. He declared that he was aware of everything, including her liaison with Carla. Amanda's eyes widened in horror as she gazed upon the incriminating images. She implored Richard to hear her explanation, but he was consumed by rage. He lunged towards Amanda, his hands grasping her throat. Amanda fought back, frantically scratching at his hands, but Richard's hold remained steadfast. Her vision began to fade, and within moments she succumbed. Richard stood over Amanda's lifeless form, his mind a tempest of fury and bewilderment. He recognized the urgency to conceal his actions. He orchestrated the scene to resemble a burglary gone awry, ransacking the office and scattering documents haphazardly. He then drove to Carla's residence, his anger reaching a boiling point. Carla was startled to find Richard at her door. She inquired about his unexpected arrival, her voice quivering. Richard forced his way inside, his eyes wild with wrath. He blamed her for ruining everything, accusing her of seducing his wife and shattering his family. Carla retreated, terror gripping her heart, and pleaded with Richard to hear her out and comprehend the situation. But Richard was deaf to her words. He lunged at Carla, who narrowly evaded him, seizing a heavy vase and striking it against his head. Richard stumbled, momentarily disoriented. Carla seized the chance to escape, fleeing into the stormy night with only the clothes she wore. She raced through the rain-drenched streets, her thoughts overwhelmed by fear and confusion. She needed to put as much distance between herself and Richard as possible. She knew that if he found her, he would end her life. Carla reached the edge of town and discovered an old, deserted cabin. She slipped inside, her body shaking with adrenaline and dread. The following morning, Ethan Everwood discovered himself bereft of both a mother and, soon after, a father. Richard, in an attempt to conceal his wrongdoings, reported Amanda as missing and concocted an alibi. However, the police swiftly identified discrepancies in his account. Amanda's remains were found in Richard's office, and forensic evidence, coupled with his unstable behavior, implicated him in the crime. He was apprehended and subsequently found guilty of Amanda's murder, receiving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Carla, on the other hand, had disappeared without a trace. Her vehicle was discovered abandoned at a rest area miles away from Belleville. Rumors circulated that she had left the country, but no concrete evidence ever surfaced. Some theorized that she had assumed a new identity and started anew. Carla's vanishing act perplexed many. Having grown up in a household characterized by religious zealotry and aggression, Carla had endured years of repression and fear. Escaping wasn't merely a means to flee, it was a lifeline to emancipation. She dreaded the consequences of being found by her family, all too familiar with the atrocities they could inflict upon her, compelling her to disappear without a trace, leaving behind a life of subjugation for one of uncertain freedom. Ethan, now an orphan, was welcomed into the home of Amanda's sister, Lydia, who nurtured him with love and devotion. The Everwood residence, once resounding with laughter and affection, now stood silent. a grim reminder of the tragic events that had transpired. Lydia endeavored to establish a stable environment for Ethan, but the shadow of his parents' calamity cast a long shadow over his childhood. She often pondered the kind of man Ethan would become, shouldering the burden of such a sinister legacy. Carla's flight was far from effortless. She recognized the necessity of departing from Belleville and vanishing entirely. She had saved some money and utilized it to purchase a bus ticket to the nearest metropolis. From there, she migrated from one location to another, assuming different identities and accepting various odd jobs to subsist. Her once self-assured and elegant demeanor was supplanted by perpetual anxiety and fear of being recognized. Carla found transient solace in small towns where she could blend into the crowd. She altered her hair color, transformed her appearance, and refrained from forming close connections with anyone. Each time she sensed someone might identify her, she moved on. Her existence evolved into a sequence of transitory sojourns and fleeting moments of tranquility. She deeply yearned for Amanda and frequently reminisced about their shared passion and the dreams they had nurtured. In a tranquil coastal town, far removed from the memories of Belleville, Carla discovered a sense of stability. She secured employment at a local diner, working tirelessly and maintaining a low profile. The town was serene, and its inhabitants were amiable yet respectful of her privacy. After months of turmoil, Carla gradually began to unwind and cautiously lower her guard. She rented a modest apartment and endeavored to rebuild her life, although the fear of exposure never completely abandoned her. Ethan, now an adolescent, grappled with the weight of his family's tragic past. He was a reserved, contemplative young man, often engrossed in his thoughts. Lydia strived to create a nurturing environment, but Ethan couldn't evade the gossip and scrutiny from those aware of his parents' history. School proved challenging, with peers either ostracizing or tormenting him due to his father's crime. Ethan sought refuge in literature and spent countless hours at the local library, losing himself in narratives distant from his reality. Lydia nurtured Ethan's interests, hoping to offer him a constructive outlet. He cultivated a love for writing, channeling his emotions and experiences into his stories. His educators recognized his potential and encouraged him to pursue a career in literature. Despite the darkness that shrouded his past, Ethan discovered hope in the future he could craft for himself. While perusing old family photographs one day, Ethan stumbled upon an image of his parents during happier times. They appeared so enamored, so vibrant. He pondered how everything had unraveled so drastically. Resolute in his quest for understanding, Ethan delved deeper into his family's history. He examined old newspaper articles, conversed with individuals who had known his parents, and reconstructed the narrative of their lives. Ethan's inquiry revealed the affair between his father and Carla. He was shocked and disheartened by the deception, but he also felt an inexplicable connection to Carla. He contemplated her fate following that fateful night. His pursuit of answers led him to contact Mark Collins, the retired private investigator Amanda had engaged. Mark, initially reluctant to revisit past wounds, was touched by Ethan's resolve. Mark divulged the particulars of his investigation, the evidence he had accumulated, and the chain of events that had unfolded. Ethan learned about the confrontation between his mother and Carla, their ensuing affair, and the night his mother was murdered. Ethan experienced a whirlwind of emotions: anger, sorrow, and an overwhelming desire for closure. Determined to locate Carla, Ethan traced the path she had left behind. He traversed the locations she had resided in, conversed with individuals who had crossed paths with her, and meticulously reconstructed her path. The clues ultimately guided him to the quaint coastal town that Carla now called home. Carla was tending to her shift at the diner when Ethan entered. Initially, she didn't recognize him, but as he drew nearer, she noticed a familiar melancholy in his gaze. Ethan acquainted himself, disclosing that he was the offspring of Amanda and Richard. Carla was taken aback, her emotions a swirl of apprehension and optimism. She invited Ethan to join her, and they began to converse. Ethan confided in Carla about his life, his tribulations, and his quest for answers. In return, Carla divulged her narrative, her escape, and her endeavors to reconstruct her life. They conversed for hours, exchanging their sorrow and their recollections of Amanda. Carla admitted her profound affection for Amanda and how the affair had been a source of both joy and anguish. Ethan inquired about the fateful night his mother was taken from him. Carla recounted the events, her voice quivering with emotion. She described Richard's confrontation, his fury and aggression, and her frantic escape. Ethan listened attentively, experiencing a blend of resentment towards his father and empathy for Carla. Ethan chose to remain in the coastal town for a while to further acquaint himself with Carla and to seek some closure. They spent considerable time together, discussing Amanda, sharing anecdotes, and aiding each other in the healing process. Carla found solace in Ethan's company, and Ethan sensed a connection and understanding that had previously eluded him. As time elapsed, the bond between Ethan and Carla strengthened. They became pillars of support for one another, mending the scars of their past. Ethan persisted in his writing, inspired by the tales Carla had imparted and the resilience he witnessed in her. Carla discovered a renewed sense of purpose, assisting Ethan and finding a means to progress with her life. Years elapsed, and Ethan published his debut novel, a fictional rendition of his family's saga. The book garnered critical praise, and Ethan was commended for his emotional profundity and narrative prowess. He dedicated the book to his mother, Amanda, and to Carla, who had demonstrated the significance of comprehension and forgiveness. Carla, on the other hand, persisted in residing in the serene coastal town, discovering tranquility and stability. She maintained contact with Ethan, frequently visiting him and witnessing his evolution into a celebrated author. She discovered comfort in the knowledge that she had assisted Ethan in obtaining closure, and that they had both discovered a path towards healing. The Everwood murders transformed into an infamous case in Belleville, a cautionary narrative of deception, treachery, and the catastrophic repercussions of concealed desires. Amanda's artwork gained substantial recognition, her landscapes now infused with a haunting allure that captivated admirers from distant lands. Richard's once esteemed name became associated with calamity and insanity. Decades later, the town still murmured about Carla Monroe, the mysterious secretary who vanished into the night. Her destiny remained one of Belleville's most significant enigmas, a lingering darkness over the tragic saga of the Everwood family. Ethan matured, bearing the burden of his parents' legacy, resolute in his pursuit to carve a distinct path and liberate himself from the cycle of deception and brutality. Ultimately, the account of the Everwood murders served as a stark reminder of the fragility of human connections and the devastating consequences of secrets and falsehoods. It was a narrative that would be retold for generations, a somber chapter in Belleville's history that would never fade from memory. Ethan persevered in his writing, his compositions frequently delving into themes of love, betrayal, and redemption. His novels resonated with readers, many of whom were oblivious to the true story behind his prose. Despite the bleakness of his past, Ethan discovered a means to transform his anguish into art, crafting something exquisite from the remnants of his family's calamity. In the end, the Everwood murders encompassed more than just a crime. They were a narrative of love, loss, and the enduring power of forgiveness. The lives of those entwined were irrevocably altered, but they found a way to progress, to discover serenity, and forge something new from the wreckage of their past.